Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. Case 1. Paul Bernardo grew up in an affluent but deeply unhappy family. His father, Kenneth Bernardo, was the son of an Italian immigrant and had made it big in the marble and tile industry. In 1960, Kenneth met and married his wife and Paul's mother, Marilyn, and the pair settled in Scarborough. However, just weeks after the marriage, cracks began to show in the relationship, culminating in Kenneth being physically abusive to Marilyn. Eventually, the pair went on to have 2 children together, Debbie and Dave. But as Marilyn slipped into a deep depression, she sought comfort in the arms of another man, someone who she had previously loved but had been blocked from marrying after her family believed him to be beneath her. The affair resulted in Marilyn becoming pregnant and eventually, on August 27, 1964, after complicated birth, Paul was born. Marilyn remained in the marriage with Kenneth, and the family of 5 lived together in a large middle-class home in Guildwood, east of Toronto. Growing up, Paul was known as a smiley, happy boy. With his mother falling deeper and deeper into depression, she eventually moved into the basement of the home, leaving Kenneth to sleep in the master bedroom alone. Paul and his siblings were often bullied at school for their unwashed clothes and poor hygiene. Looking for an outlet, Paul threw himself into the Boy Scouts and would go on weekend trips away with his peers, learning new skills together. With Marilyn wasting away in her own despair, Kenneth would prowl the streets of Guildwood, peering through the windows of young women, and eventually progressing to a charge of molestation in 1975. Keeping his sadistic behaviors closer to home, Kenneth began sexually assaulting his daughter, Debbie. The abuse wasn't a secret. Paul, his brother Dave, and Marilyn all knew about the abuse, even witnessing it on occasion. When Paul was 15, an argument between him and his parents resulted in the nature of his birth finally being revealed. Once the secret was out in the open, Marilyn began tormenting Paul, calling him the bastard child from hell and blaming him for how her life turned out. Paul, having had his entire life turned around, did not take the revelation well. He tried desperately to fit in with his peers at school and went to great lengths to hide the depravity he faced at home. By the next summer, Paul got a job as a camp counselor and impressed his employers with how kind he was to the young children he cared for. But Paul was hiding a secret of his own. For years, he had been collecting pornography and had become obsessed with what he had seen. Following in his father's footsteps, he too had begun stalking the streets and peering into windows, trying to catch a glimpse of women undressing. After leaving high school, Paul enrolled at the University of Toronto, where he studied accountancy. During his time there, Paul was popular with young women and would regularly be seen on dates around the campus. However, Paul had a dark sexual appetite. The women he slept with were subjected to scripted, violent sex, sodomy at knife point, and strangulation, all at Paul's insistence. As each relationship came to an end, Paul would simply brush himself off and find his next partner, a revolving door of women he would use and abuse in order to satisfy himself. After graduating college, Paul began working at Price Waterhouse as a junior accountant. Not one to settle down, Paul went back to his old ways, stalking the streets to find women. Except, this time, instead of peering at them through the darkness, he would rape them. On May 4th, 1987, while a young woman was getting off a bus near her parents' house, Paul grabbed and brutally raped her. There would be 2 other assaults of this nature in the next week alone. Authorities came to the conclusion that the attacks, which all involved beatings, severe verbal abuse, and ominous threats to deter victims from contacting the police, had all been carried out by the same man, who the newspapers swiftly dubbed the Scarborough Rapist. The women were all between the ages of 15 and 21. In October 1987, with multiple assaults under his belt, Paul met his match in a hotel bar one night, 17-year-old Carla Homolka. Born in Ontario on May 4, 1970, Carla was the daughter of Czechoslovak immigrant Karel Homolka and his wife, Dorothy. With 2 sisters, Lori and Tammy, Carla was known for being pretty, popular, and clever. She was a straight-A student with a promising future. But as she grew up, things went awry. In high school, Carla began acting out, not listening to teachers, and falling out with friends. She would frequently lie about suicide attempts and cut herself in a bid for attention. Carla began working as a vet assistant at a veterinary clinic during high school. And as soon as she graduated, she was hired on as a full-time veterinary technician. In October 1987, 17-year-old Carla attended a pet store conference in Scarborough and was staying with a friend at a Howard Johnson hotel. It was there that she met 23-year-old Paul, and the pair immediately hit it off. After chatting for a while, the pair went upstairs and slept with each other. From that night on, they were inseparable. Paul would visit Carla as often as he could. In the weeks after they began dating, Paul became increasingly controlling over Carla, telling her how to dress, what she could or couldn't eat, and even calling her ugly and not worthy of him. Unlike the women he dated in college, Carla didn't run. In fact, she encouraged his depraved sexual behavior, submitting to his dark desires. When Paul found out Carla wasn't a virgin when they met, he was enraged. Despite the fact that he wasn't either, he was furious that the object of his obsession didn't solely belong to him. Despite this, Paul decided to continue the relationship. But he wasn't willing to give up his secret life as a rapist. Instead, he brought Carla into the fold. One day Paul asked her what she would do if he was a rapist. When Carla responded that she thought that it was cool, he returned to the streets within days, capturing and assaulting women with Carla in tow. Paul would hide out at various bus stops, waiting for an easy victim to walk past. When they did, he would grab and rape them, usually in bushes. By the end of 1988, he had assaulted or attempted to assault over 13 women, occasionally bringing Carla along to watch. Police desperately tried to solve the case of the Scarborough rapist, collecting evidence from each victim and drawing a composite sketch which they would share among other police departments in the country. Paul was questioned over the rapes twice, but let go with no further action. Getting away with it motivated Paul to carry on his heinous crime spree. By 1990, Paul had lost his job and begun smuggling cigarettes in order to make ends meet. It was during this time that Paul became obsessed with Carla's 15-year-old sister, Tammy. He would sneak into her room while visiting Carla's parents. Now engaged, the Homolkas took Paul in with open arms, adoring the man Carla had chosen to be her husband. But in the dead of night, Paul would sneak into Tammy's room and masturbate while she slept. In July of that year, Paul expressed to Carla that since it was impossible for her to give him her virginity, he should take Tammy's. Instead of recoiling in horror, Carla agreed, and the two made plans for Paul to rape Tammy, telling him it would be his Christmas present. On July 24, 1990, Carla set their plan into motion, lacing Tammy's food with Valium that she'd stolen from the veterinarian office where she worked. With Tammy asleep, Paul crept into the room, ready to attack. However, the dosage wasn't strong enough and Tammy woke up just seconds before Paul could attack. Undeterred, they struck again on December 23rd, spiking Tammy's drink with sleeping pills, to the point of almost overdosing her. Not wanting his plan to fail, as soon as Tammy fell asleep, the pair worked together to undress her, while holding a rag soaked in anesthetics over her mouth to keep her from waking up. Both of them then proceeded to rape Tammy, laughing as they committed the heinous act against Carla's own sister. After the attack, Tammy began to vomit and stopped breathing, choking on her own vomit. The couple made some attempts to revive her, but it was no use. They had unwittingly killed Carla's younger sister. Panicking, the pair moved quickly to cover up their crime, dressing Tammy and cleaning up any evidence. Once everything had been cleaned and returned to how it was, they called 911. Emergency services soon arrived, but there was nothing that could be done. Tammy was pronounced dead. Her death was ruled accidental due to overconsumption of alcohol, but it was noted that had sustained chemical burns to her face. No further investigation was made. Relieved that they'd seemingly gotten away with their unplanned murder, the pair laughed and joked at her funeral. Paul stroked Tammy's hair as she lay in her casket, and sickeningly, the couple put a photo of themselves next to her body before she was buried. After Tammy's death, the pair rented a home together in Port Dalhousie. Here they would reenact 15-year-old Tammy's rape and murder, adding it to their sadistic sexual role-playing. When Paul drank, he would berate Carla, blaming her for her sister's death and telling her that she had stolen Tammy from him. To make up for it, they sought out their next victim. On June 7, 1991, Carla invited a teenager she met at work over to the couple's home. After chatting with Carla and Paul for a while, the teen known only as Jane Doe passed out. Her drink had been laced with triazolam, a fast-acting sedative. At this point, Carla presented the sleeping teenager to Paul, telling him that she was a surprise gift for their upcoming wedding. As Jane Doe slept, the couple raped her, filming themselves in the act. The next day, the teen woke up and left the home, not realizing what she had been subjected to the previous night. Just days later, on June 15th, Paul met 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffy in Burlington after he'd driven there with the intention of stealing license plates to use for his cigarette smuggling activities. Leslie had missed her curfew by just minutes after attending a funeral and had been locked out of her home as a result. Unable to find anywhere else to sleep, Leslie walked the streets. During her wandering, Paul approached her and told her he was on his way to break into someone's house. Leslie simply asked him if he had a cigarette and offered to accompany him on his burglary. On the way back to his car, Paul grabbed Leslie, blindfolded her, and forced her into the back of his car. Once home, Paul shouted to Carla to come and see their new plaything, and the pair dragged the terrified 14-year-old inside. Inside, the pair recorded themselves torturing Leslie. With Bob Marley and David Bowie music playing in the background, the pair brutalized her. Paul taunted her, saying, still blindfolded, Leslie screamed out in pain, desperate for the attack to end, and begging for them to let her go. The next day, the couple decided it was possible that the teen could recognize them, so they concluded she needed to die. She was given a lethal dose of triazolam and strangled by Paul. Once dead, they moved her body to the basement and would later set about dismembering the teenager. Encasing her in cement, her body was dumped in Lake Gibson. On June 29, 1991, the same day Paul and Carla were married, Leslie's body was discovered offshore of the lake by a father and son who were out fishing. Authorities were called, and Leslie was identified by her dental records. Not yet tied to the Scarborough rapist, police opened a murder investigation. During the year following their wedding, Carla invited numerous young girls to the house, and the couple would drug and rape them repeatedly, usually recording the attacks. They all survived the attacks, but had no memory of them. Then April 16, 1992, the couple abducted 15-year-old Kristen French as she left school. Kristen was held hostage for 3 days by the couple, raped and tortured, with the promise that Paul gave her that she would be freed. Kristen initially stayed calm, hoping that she would be able to escape. However, as the abuse went on, Kristen became more defiant, calling Paul a bastard. Seeing red and remembering what his mother called him, he beat Kristen with a rubber mallet, strangling her for 7 minutes and not stopping until she was dead. Like they did for Leslie, the pair began taking steps to cover up the crime. They cut Kristen's hair, washed her, and threw her body in a ditch over 50 kilometers or 30 miles away in Burlington. The bodies of Leslie and Kristen were discovered fairly close together, and police soon realized the murders were connected. After interviewing witnesses who had seen Kristen being kidnapped, a sketch of the killer was released, and an alarming connection was finally made. He looked exactly the same as the Scarborough rapist. Realizing the crimes were connected, the press quickly picked up on the case and tips flooded in. Many tips claimed that the man in the sketch resembled Paul Bernardo. Colleagues and friends rang in with their concerns, and Paul was soon brought in for questioning. Despite his DNA having been gathered years ago for the rape cases, it was never actually tested. And given the backlog, it still would not be tested for some more months. So it wasn't his DNA that would be Paul's undoing. It was his wife. On January 6, 1993, less than 2 years after the pair was married, Carla was brought into the emergency room at St. Catherine's General Hospital after having been beaten by Paul. She had sustained a broken wrist and had been beaten so severely that her eyes were black and she couldn't see or walk properly. Paul was arrested for assault, but was released on bail. After being treated, Carla sought refuge with her family in Brampton. There, she confided to her family that she knew the Scarborough rapist and the schoolgirl murderer. It was Paul. Shocked, Carla's family convinced her that she needed to report everything to police. Despite her own hand in most of the crimes Paul committed, she knew her best way out of this was to confess and hope for a plea bargain. In February 1993, Carla went to the police requesting immunity for her confession. While negotiations were underway, Paul was arrested and a search warrant was executed on the couple's home. Inside, detectives found their horrific home videos along with a selection of books and movies on pornography and serial killers. Once the police discovered the items in the home, Carla's request for immunity was denied. Instead, she was offered 12 years imprisonment under a manslaughter charge instead of facing up to 3 murder charges. If she accepted the plea deal, she would likely be released in just 3 short years for good behavior. Carla agreed and detailed everything she knew to the police. The rapes, the stalking, and the murders of her sister and 2 other teenage girls. She cooperated fully with the investigation, digging Paul's grave. A month later, in March 1993, before her trial began, Carla was admitted into a psychiatric hospital. There, she wrote to her family, "Work to drug her with. He threatened me and physically and emotionally abused me when I refused. No words I can say can make you understand what he put me through." So as stupidly, I agreed to do as he said. But something, maybe the combination of drugs and the food she ate that night, caused her to vomit. I tried so hard to save her. I am so sorry, but no words I can say can bring her back. I would gladly give my life for hers. I don't expect you to ever forgive me, for I will never forgive myself. The press went wild with the story dubbed the Ken and Barbie killers. The media attention surrounding the case was unprecedented. On trial in June 1993, Carla received the sentence offered during plea negotiations and was sentenced to serve her 12-year term at Kingston Prison for Women. Paul's trial took place 2 years later, in May 1995. After his arrest, Paul consistently challenged the claims made against him. He denied the crimes in police interviews and attempted to place all the blame on his wife. But once the pair's videotapes documenting their crimes were aired in court, his claims didn't hold water. During Carla's trial, the public had been made to believe that she was a battered wife and unwilling accomplice. Being physically and verbally abusive to me at that time, as you know, he kept on pushing and pushing and pushing, and finally I said okay. And thinking that it wouldn't be, it would just be one time. That's it. We shut him up, and he would stop bothering me and stop hurting me. If I didn't turn the water tap off completely, he'd hit me. If I didn't say the right thing, he'd hit me. He held knives to my throat. He told me I better watch my back. He said, "Always watch your back with me." But once the contents of the videotapes were revealed during Paul's trial, it became undeniably clear that Carla was not only a willing but eager and active participant in the rapes, beatings, and murders. Public outrage across the country regarding the plea bargain was swift. Many felt that the prosecution had made a deal with the devil. Many also noted how the killings didn't begin until after Carla became involved, and even speculated that she may have been the one who wanted the victims killed out of jealousy. But none of that mattered. It was too late. During Paul's trial, various unidentified women who had been attacked or escaped from Paul described their experiences. The prosecution stated that they could not say without a doubt that all victims had been identified and that there may still be more out there. On September 1st, 1995, Paul Bernardo was convicted of over 30 charges relating to the kidnappings, rapes, and murders. He was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Carla was released in 2005 and has since remarried Terry Bordelais, her former lawyer's brother. Living under the name Leanne Teal, she lives in Quebec with she and Terry's 3 children. A Facebook page called Watching Carla Homolka was set up, which tracks her movements around the city. In an interview since her release, she said, "At the time, I was 17 years old. I lacked knowledge. I feared being abandoned. I was desperate for a relationship. I lacked confidence. There are numerous aspects of myself that I was unaware of at the time, but I'm now aware of." As of the making of this video in 2022, Paul is still in prison serving at Millhaven Penitentiary in Eastern Ontario. By February 2018, Bernardo met the requirements for parole. He's made 2 requests for parole since then, and both have been denied. His most recent request for parole was made in June 2021. Paul's plea was denied after just 1 hour of deliberation by the presiding judge. Paul argued his case by saying that he had been without meaningful human contact for more than 10,000 days, and that this had left him feeling stressed and anxious. He affirmed that he was a changed person, and he ironically characterized his punishment as cruel and inhumane. "I am no longer preoccupied with fantasies," Paul said in his parole application. "Without a doubt, I'm low risk. I have fought all deviant sexual behavior for 2 years. After just 30 minutes, his parole was denied. And today, Paul spends most of the day confined in his cell with 1 hour of solitary yard time. Paul is reported to have no meaningful human interaction with other inmates or guards, and the only thing he has to keep himself company are the letters he gets from his disillusioned admirers. In his own words, "I cry all the time." Thank you so much for watching. We hope this video did justice to all the young victims of this heartless couple's crimes. We find it both ironic and perfectly fitting that Paul feels he's being treated inhumanely, and we only wish Carla could have shared in more of that inhumanity. Case 2. This is one of the most perplexing cases to come out of the Philippines due to the various twists, turns, and divided public opinion. It's now considered settled, but let me know what you think. It was a typical Monday morning in Sitio Mohan, Barangay Tisa, in Cebu City. The day started like any other, with the usual hustle of morning commuters. Around 7 a.m., something unusual caught the attention of several witnesses. A large discarded carton box lying conspicuously along the roadside. A security guard from a nearby private subdivision spotted the box. Initially, he dismissed it, assuming it had simply fallen off a courier or delivery van. Others passing by noticed a foul odor emanating from the box, with flies swarming around it. Yet, no one intervened. Fast forward to 1 p.m. A street sweeper on duty decided to move the box away from the road. However, it was too heavy for him to carry alone. Seeking help, he approached the local barangay tanids, or the village peacekeepers. As they attempted to lift the box, its flap suddenly opened, and to their horror, an arm popped out. The street sweeper and the tanid rushed to the barangay hall, their minds racing with what they'd just seen. Captain Ringo Pacana immediately relayed the alarming discovery to the Labangan police station. The police arrived at the scene and confirmed everyone's worst fear. The box contained a dead body. What had been mistaken for discarded garbage was, in fact, the remains of a woman. By 2 p.m., investigators were meticulously examining the scene. The body was in a gruesome state. The woman had her arms and legs tied with aluminum cables and was wrapped in a white blanket. Her face appeared to have been smashed and burned off, possibly with cables. Bruises covered various parts of her body, although these could have been post-mortem changes. Despite the meticulous examination, her identity remained a mystery. All they could ascertain was she had dyed blonde hair, was wearing a black sweater and black shorts, and her nails were manicured. These details suggested she was possibly not a local resident of Tisa, but a visitor. Who was this woman? How did she end up here, discarded like trash? These were the questions haunting the investigators as they began piecing together the tragic puzzle. The day after the gruesome discovery, on July 18, 2023, a breakthrough in the case emerged. Authorities matched the description of the identified woman to a recently filed missing persons report. The victim was suspected to be Rimay Tacmo, a 19-year-old female from Panibo City in the Valle del Norte. Rimay had been staying in Mandaue City, having flown into Cebu on June 11th, seeking employment opportunities. Some sources claim she arrived on June 14th, but regardless of the exact date, she had been in Cebu for over a month. Investigators reached out to Rimay's friends and family for identification. They confirmed there were fears. Body was indeed Rimay's. Her favorite black shorts and a distinctive necklace she always wore were unmistakable. Adding to the uncertainty, the relatives recognized the clothes Rimay was last seen wearing. They also noted that her smartphone and wallet were missing. In an effort to retrace her steps, police began gathering CCTV footage from areas where Rimay was last seen alive, including locations in Mandaue City, where she had been staying. Investigators expanded their search to include inns, suspecting that the white blanket she was wrapped in might have come from one of these establishments. Each piece of evidence brought them a step closer to understanding what happened to Rimay Tacmo. But first, who was she? Rimay Tacmo was a 19-year-old from Davao del Norte. Her family and loved ones describe her as a kind, obedient, and always prioritizing a family type of person. Despite growing up in a broken family, Rimay was known for her considerate nature and eagerness to help others. She was greatly loved by her parents and two sisters, who doted on her as the youngest in the family. Her father, Romeo Tacmo, emphasized her gentle demeanor and obedience, highlighting her dedication as a student and her determination to graduate from college to support her family. Rimay lived with her eldest sister, Roki, in Panibo City while attending college. Roki, who owned a business, supported Rimay financially and appreciated her help in caring for her niece. Rimay's aunt in Sabongo, Cebu, remembered her as a loving girl with no enemies. Initially, Rimay studied criminology with dreams of becoming a police officer. However, she later considered shifting to tourism before ultimately deciding to leave her studies altogether to work and contribute to her family's finances. Despite Roki's initial hesitation about her decision to quit school, Rimay's resolve won her sister's approval to start working. Unexpectedly, Rimay traveled alone to Cebu for a job opportunity with her friend, Jewel Smith. She didn't inform her family, who believed she was still in Davao. Rimay spent several days at the establishment's staff house before relocating to a boarding house in Barangay, Mandaue City with Smith. Rimay had been working in a bar and restaurant in Mandaue City, right after arriving in Cebu. Her family was unaware of her whereabouts. It came as a shock when they found out she was in Cebu. Remai called her sister and asked for help booking a ticket to Davao to attend a friend's christening on July 21st. Roki surmised that her sister might have opted not to inform them about going to Cebu for fear she would not be allowed to. Reassured her family that she was doing fine in Cebu. Tragically, this would be the last reassurance they would receive. July 16, 2023. Multiple sources, including Ree's friend Jewel Smith and a vendor from a local food stall near her boarding house in Barangay, Mundao City, reported that they last saw Remai on that fateful day, July 16th. The police examined CCTV footage from around the area, and weeks after Remai's death, crucial footage surfaced. It shows Ree boarding a yellow motorcycle, leaving her boarding house. The driver, a man in an orange-colored shirt. Investigators are now on the lookout for the motorcycle driver, the last known person to see Ree alive. They believe that there's a grim possibility that after traveling a few meters, Ree was forcibly transferred to another vehicle by her assailants. The journey of that motorcycle is key. It traveled towards Cebu City in Panang Dite Road in Barangay Mabalo, then proceeded to Escalation Street. Unfortunately, identifying the driver remains a challenge. His face was obscured by a helmet, but this footage has been handed over to the Regional Anti-Cybercrime Unit for enhancement. In the initial phase of the investigation, the police had grim suspicions. They thought Ree's face had been burnt with hot water or acid. Further examination revealed hematomas on her wrists and legs and a stab wound on her side. The autopsy concluded that the cause of death was strangulation. As for her face, it wasn't burnt. It was the effect of decomposition. Significant developments occurred on July 27, 2023, 10 days after Ree was last seen alive. Remai's missing smartphone finally surfaced. A man handed it over to the Labangan police station, claiming he had bought it from another near Carbon Public Market. When he checked the device, he found photos of Remai, recognizing her as a victim found inside an abandoned box in Burgi Tisa. He immediately reported it to the authorities. This discovery happened just 2 days after he purchased the phone. Fortunately, CCTV footage near Carbon Market captured the man who sold Ree's mobile phone. He was wearing an orange-colored t-shirt, a detail that connected him to the initial investigation. This man had now been tagged as a person of interest in the case. His image, believed to hold vital information about the 19-year-old Remai Takumo, was released by the Cebu City Police Station. According to the police, the unidentified suspect first tried to unlock Takumo's phone, but failed. Unable to bypass the security, he opted to sell it for 1,700 pesos. The police are urging the public to help identify and locate this person of interest. As part of their ongoing investigation, they are still searching for the driver of the motorcycle that Ree boarded on July 16th, the same day she was last seen alive. On July 29th, out of pure coincidence, officers from the Guadalupe police station arrested Simeon Gabutero Jr., a 22-year-old construction worker for the dangerous possession of a firearm in Cebu City. Soon after, police recognized Gabutero as the man in the picture released by the Cebu City Police Office, previously tagged as a person of interest in the Takumo case. Gabutero, however, insisted on his innocence, claiming he was not the killer of the 19-year-old. In an interview with CDN Digital, Gabutero maintained that he did not know the victim. Upon his arrest, though, he admitted to selling Remai's cell phone. Gabutero claimed he was merely following the instructions of his neighbor, who lived in the same neighborhood in Guadalupe. Gabutero stated that Gabaison had given him Takumo's cell phone on July 16th, instructing him to unlock or sell it. He managed to sell the phone for 1,700 pesos, handing the money to Gabaison, who gave him 500 pesos as promised. Gabutero asserted that he had no idea the phone belonged to a possible murder victim, and that Gabaison had instructed him to keep the ownership of the phone a secret. When Gabutero realized the police were searching for him, he chose not to turn himself in out of fear of being implicated in the crime. During his confession, Gabutero revealed a disturbing detail. He had seen Gabaison allegedly arguing and attempting to strangle the victim. He witnessed this altercation near an elementary school in Barangay, Guadalupe, Cebu City, a day before Remai's body was found stuffed inside a carton and dumped by the roadside. The 22-year-old Gabutero had a criminal history of participating in a brazen daylight robbery in Toledo City just last June. Alongside another unnamed suspect, Gabutero allegedly robbed a businesswoman at her home in Sidiabad. They made off with 8,000 pesos in cash and valuables, including jewelry and gadgets, worth over 150,000 pesos. Robbery charges were filed against Gabutero on July 7th, roughly 10 days before he reportedly involved in the tragic death of Ria May Tacoma. On July 30th, to verify Gabutero's claims, the police tracked down Gabutero Gabison, who was arrested on an unrelated charge of illegal drug possession. When brought in for questioning, Gabison vehemently denied Gabutero's accusations. He insisted that he never knew, met, or encountered either Gabutero or the victim Ria May. As part of the meticulous investigation, the police conducted DNA testing for both Gabutero and Gabison on August 4th. This forensic examination was crucial in examining any possible connection between the suspects and the evidence found at the crime scene. The authorities are leaving no stone unturned in their pursuit of justice for Ria May. Despite the arrests and ongoing investigation, the police continue to appeal to the public. They urge anyone with information about what happened to Ria May and who might be responsible for her death to come forward. Meanwhile, there's concern amongst the public about the rapid identification and apprehension of the suspects. An article written on August 1st expressed suspicion regarding how quickly the perpetrators were found, suggesting there might be more complexities about this case than initially apparent. On August 5th, while the results of the DNA test were still pending, several individuals claiming to have information about the gruesome killing surfaced, causing a flurry of speculation on social media. Among the new voices was a taxi driver, who during an interview with a local radio station, recounted an encounter with the passengers carrying a large, empty box on July 17th, the same day Ria May's body was found in Burgatiza. According to the taxi driver, one of the passengers was a petite woman with various tattoos, and she was carrying a large, empty box. She was accompanied by a foreign-looking man. The pair had boarded his taxi at B. Rodriguez Street and were heading to a condominium in Burgatiza. The taxi driver's description seemed to implicate Jewel Smith, one of Ria May's closest friends. On August 7th, a visibly distressed Jewel Smith went to the Cebu City Police Station to clear her name. Smith asserted her innocence, stating she had not left her boarding house in Burg Ilok, Mandaue City, since clocking out from her job at a bar at AS Fortuna on July 16th. Last July 17th, I was just in Ilok. My neighbors could testify to that. I really don't like going out, Smith declared. She also denied being on B. Rodriguez Street or in Burg Ilabongan on July 17th. Smith stood by her previous statements that the last time she saw Ria May was on July 16th. Since the taxi driver's interview, Jewel and her family have been subjected to hate, prejudice, and baseless accusations on social media. Her photos circulated online without her permission, compounding her distress. In response to these developments, the police urged individuals with information about the case to come forward directly to them rather than turning to social media. Smith is also considering filing charges against the taxi driver for spreading lies and causing undue stress to her and her family. When Ria May did not return to her boarding house the next day, Smith filed a missing persons report, which was then referred to the police. As the police continue to investigate, they have taken into account both the taxi driver's and Smith's statements. However, they remain focused on Gabutero and Gabison as their primary suspects, ruling out Smith and acknowledging her cooperation with their inquiries. On August 10th, Seamin Gabutero Jr., a construction worker, finally confessed to being the perpetrator. Police Colonel Aranio Dalagdag of the Cebu City Police Office announced in a press conference that the murder charges would be filed against Gabutero. This confession came after DNA test results showed samples under Ria May's fingernails matched Gabutero's DNA. Gabutero admitted to killing Ria May when she visited his boarding house in Barangay Guadalupe early on the morning of July 16th. He claimed that Ria, whom he had met through Facebook, was his girlfriend. They had been in a long-distance relationship since December 5th of the previous year, but had never met in person until that day. On July 16th, they agreed to meet for the first time at Gabutero's boarding house around 6 a.m. Gabutero said he became enraged when he discovered that Ria had made multiple Facebook accounts and received messages from other men. His jealousy and anger boiled over, especially considering the money he had been sending her from his meager earnings. Gabutero, who earned 400 pesos daily as a construction worker, had been sending money to Ria since they became a couple. His frustration grew when he found drug paraphernalia in Ria's bag, feeling that his hard-earned money was being misused. However, to Gabutero, when he confronted Rhea, she laughed at his outburst, which further infuriated him. In a fit of rage, he squeezed her neck. Rhea did not scream, but only held on to his hand in an attempt to resist. Jewel Smith, Rhea's friend, mentioned that Rhea had been drinking before the incident, which had explained her inability to fully resist the attack. Gabutero also expressed anger that Rhea had not informed him of her arrival in Cebu. After realizing she was dead, he wrapped her in a blanket, tied her up with pieces of garter and shoestring, and placed her inside a cardboard box. With the help of another person, he transported her body on his motorcycle and dumped it in an overgrown area in Barangay Tisa. Gabutero denied burning Rhea's face, a detail the medical legal officer explained could have resulted from decomposition, as she had been dead for over 24 hours. Distraught and filled with regret, Gabutero told the police that he was ready to face the consequences. His confession, detailed in an extrajudicial statement signed on August 10th, also revealed an attempt to frame his neighbor, Roberto Gabison, due to a past dispute. The police confirmed that no evidence linked Gabison to Rhea May's death, and Gabutero's admission cleared him of any involvement. Similarly, no evidence implicated Jewel Smith. Discrepancies in the taxi driver's claims, such as the timing and description of the box, further exonerated her. Gabutero, in his confession, admitted to killing Rhea inside his boarding house at approximately 6 a.m. Additionally, CCTV footage captured Gabutero attempting to dispose of Rhea's body around 10 p.m. the same day. The footage showed him transporting the box containing her body on a motorcycle. However, Gabutero has remained tight-lipped about the identity of the backrider who was with him at the time. Despite the confession and mounting evidence, Rhea May's family were shocked and dissatisfied with the outcome. They firmly believed that Rhea was not in a relationship and that the confession tarnished her reputation, adding insult to their grief. Rhea's family has called for a parallel investigation into her brutal killing. They questioned the credibility of Gabutero's confession, stating, "The family felt that the allegations made by Gabutero in his extrajudicial confession were not thoroughly vetted." They criticized the police for not verifying claims that Gabutero and Rhea knew each other since December 2022, or that he had sent money to her through Gcash. The family showed mistrust of the investigation and publicly scrutinized the case. In a press conference on August 11th, Police Mayor Angelito Valasar, chief of Labangan Police Station, responded to the concerns raised by Rhea May's family. He urged them to visit the police station to personally review the evidence in their possession. Valasar expressed respect to the family's concerns and emphasized the importance of transparency in the investigation. Meanwhile, a significant development occurred when the motorcycle taxi driver who transported Rhea made a Barangay Guadalupe from Barangay Loc in Mandaue City came forward. Marjun Carel, a resident of Lapu-Lapu City, appeared at the Labangan police station on August 11th to clear his name. Carel stated that he recently realized that Rhea May was the passenger he had transported when he recognized his motorcycle in social media posts. He had no intention of hiding, explaining that he simply brought the passenger to Guadalupe for a fare of 300 pesos. On the dawn of July 16th, Carel took Tacmo from Barangay Loc to Gabutero's residence. He even had to ask for directions from people on the streets. Quote, "I only found out yesterday, Thursday, August 10th, that my passenger had passed away. I knew there was a murder, but I didn't know that she was the passenger." This confirmation corroborated Rhea May's presence at Gabutero's home prior to her death. Adding to this, Gabutero's mother also confirmed Rhea May's presence at their place. She explained that she had left her apartment before Rhea May arrived because Gabutero had told his family to leave as he would be having a female guest. When she returned an hour later to cook breakfast, she knocked on the door at 6 a.m. and found Gabutero alone and sweating when he answered. Later that evening at 7 p.m., she discovered a carton box and questioned Gabutero about its contents. He claimed it was filled with clothes. At 10 p.m., Gabutero asked his younger brother to help him move the box, still insisting it contained clothes. On August 14th, the police presented the evidence recovered to Rhea May's relatives, proving that Simeon Gabutero was behind the killing. This evidence included a black jacket Gabutero wore, the red helmet and white jacket worn by his younger brother when he disposed of Rhea May's body, as well as Gabutero's bag and the shirt he wore when he sold Rhea May's cell phone. In a sworn statement, Simeon's younger brother recounted their journey. They were headed to Sitio Mohan, carrying a cardboard box that Simeon claimed held clothes. Little did the boy know he was partaking in the disposal of a body, which was found the following morning on the roadside of Mohan. The evidence began to stack up. CCTV footages, witness statements, and forensic evidence all pointed in one direction, towards Simeon Gabutero. Police Mayor Angelito Balasar, the chief of the Labangan police station, confirmed that the recordings matched the timeline and actions described by Simeon's brother. The chilling truth was becoming undeniable. The wheels of justice began to turn. Cebu City Police Officer, Director Colonel Ironio Dalagdag, announced that the murder case against Simeon Gabutero would proceed once all the necessary documents were in order. The victim's father, Romeo Tacmo, expressed his gratitude towards the police for their swift action in solving his daughter's murder. For Ria May's family, the pain was unbearable. Her sister, Roche Tacmo, Paul Bakken, and Grace Tacmo, initially filled with disbelief and sorrow, were eventually convinced of Gabutero's guilt. This conviction came after reviewing the evidence and hearing explanation. Their trust in the system brought a semblance of closure, though the wound of loss would never truly heal. Further sealing Gabutero's fate was a neighbor's affidavit. The neighbor had seen Simeon on July 17th with several nail scratches on his arm. This observation aligned perfectly with the findings of the PNP forensic unit. They theorized that Ria May, in a desperate struggle for her life, had clawed at her attacker, leaving behind crucial DNA evidence under her fingernails. Tests confirmed that this DNA matched Gabutero's. On September 1, 2023, from his detention cell at the Labangan police station, Simeon Gabutero reiterated his confession, speaking directly to reporters. He said, "I killed Ria May Tacmo. I was not forced to admit it." A woman, known only by the alias Bianca Lee, took to social media and a radio show on August 31st, accusing Ria May's friend, Jewel Smith, of being involved in her killing. But Gabutero stood firm, stating he had never met Smith, and these allegations were baseless. This once again prompted Police Major Angelito Balasar to address the public directly. He urged anyone with genuine evidence to come forward through proper channels rather than spreading unverified claims online. Major Balasar's appeal was clear. Justice can only be served through the correct legal processes, not through the court of public opinion. Meanwhile, lawyer Ruffold Bannock, station manager of radio station DYHB, offered a reward of 100,000 pesos for any substantial evidence Bianca Lee claimed to have. However, no such evidence has surfaced, leading many to question the veracity of her statements. Gabutero's steadfast admission faced skepticism, with some alleging he was coerced to protect more influential figures. Major Balasar countered these claims, emphasizing the transparency and integrity of the investigation. Representatives from the Commission on Human Rights were present throughout, ensuring no force were used during Gabutero's confession. The legal machinery continued to move forward. On August 18, 2023, murder charges were officially filed against Gabutero and his 15-year-old brother, who had admitted to aiding and disposing of the box containing Ria May's body. Despite the younger brother's lack of knowledge about the box's contents, his involvement in the disposal led to the charges. Major Balasar expressed confidence in the strength of the case against the Gabutero brothers. He asserted that even if Simeon attempted to retract his confession, the overwhelming evidence gathered would uphold the charges. Amidst this firestorm of speculation and social discussion, we must remember it's a young woman who wanted to support her family, and who had a full life ahead of her who lost her life. But the case of Ria May Tacmo stands as a testament to the dedication of the law enforcement official, who despite heavy criticism, doubt, and controversy, worked tirelessly to seek the truth. Case 3. A visibly nervous 73-year-old man arrived at the hospital with what medical staff originally assumed was his daughter. But as doctors examined the girl, they were silently horrified. The girl looked old enough to be the older man's wife instead of his daughter. Her skin was nearly void of color, and the few teeth she had remaining were rotten and barely hanging on. Their horror was magnified when they learned the girl was actually his granddaughter, and that she was just 19 years old. But the shock that the medical staff and police felt at that point would pale in comparison to what they would soon learn were the circumstances that led to what they were seeing. In the words of the victim, "No one is going to believe me." After 24 years of captivity, over 3,000 rapes, and 7 children fathered, today we're talking about one of the most infamous kidnappings in history, involving one of the longest times spent in captivity. There have been cases of children being kidnapped and stowed away in secret basements before, but the planning and extensiveness of this case is exceptionally disturbing. Joseph Fritzl was an only child. He was born on April 9, 1935 in Amstetten, Lower Austria, to parents Maria and Joseph Fritzl Sr. Fritzl Sr. was a severe alcoholic who abandoned Maria and Joseph when Joseph was just 4 years old, leaving him to be raised alone by his mother. Fritzl Sr. ultimately died in battle during World War II, fighting for the armed forces of Nazi Germany. His name appears on a memorial plaque in Amstetten. In 1956, 21-year-old Joseph Fritzl married 17-year-old Rosemary. At the time, Joseph was a well-known and respected electrical engineer. In 1967, just over 10 years after the couple had been married, Joseph's deviant behavior began to come to light. Joseph broke into the home of a 24-year-old nurse and raped her at knife point. He was arrested and served 12 months of his 18-month prison sentence before being released. Joseph was also named as a suspect in the attempted rape of a 21-year-old and also had a history of indecent exposure. Despite the conviction and his history, Joseph and Rosemary's marriage continued. They would go on to have 7 children together, 3 sons and 4 daughters. In 1966, Joseph and Rosemary welcomed their 4th child, Elizabeth, having had 2 other daughters and 1 son before her. Elizabeth's childhood was a struggle, to say the least. Joseph's toxicity permeated their day-to-day lives, with he and Elizabeth getting into frequent arguments that would result in her getting beaten. The beatings were not exclusive to Elizabeth, as Joseph was abusive to his wife and all of his children. Elizabeth received the majority of the beatings because she was one of the only ones willing to stand up to her authoritarian father. Aside from Joseph being physically abusive toward her and her siblings, he also began sexually abusing Elizabeth from the time she was 11 years old. After completing her government-required education at age 15, Elizabeth began a course to become a waitress. But before she finished, she decided she'd suffered enough of the abuse she was receiving at home, and in January 1983, she and a friend from work ran away from home to Vienna. Police found her within 3 weeks and returned her to her parents. Upon her return, she continued the course she was taking to become a waitress and was ultimately offered a job in the nearby city Linz. Elizabeth thought her life was finally about to change for the better. Unfortunately, nothing could be further from the truth. Knowing that Elizabeth would soon be bound for Linz and completely out of his control, it was time for Joseph to execute his long-awaited plan. On August 28, 1984, shortly after Elizabeth turned 18, Joseph lured her into the basement of the family home by lying and telling her he needed help carrying a door. In reality, for the last 6 years, Joseph had been building what he told his family was an underground fallout shelter. While some might think this to be a bit suspicious, the Cold War between the United States and the USSR was raging on, and the lingering threat of nuclear warfare was always looming. So building a nuclear fallout shelter in your house was not uncommon. But Joseph was not building a fallout shelter. The shelter was simply his cover story. On that August night, Elizabeth was about to find out what he was really building when she helped her father secure the final door to the area. She held the door in place while he attempted to secure it, shortly before slamming it in her face and knocking her backward into the shelter, or more accurately, the prison. He ran in with an ether-soaked towel, covered her mouth, and waited for her to fall unconscious. This would be the beginning of her new life, a life of living separate from society, barely kept alive by her captive father. The prison was a cramped but cleverly planned room, hidden behind a small square entrance that featured an elaborate keypad lock that Joseph guaranteed only he could operate. On top of that, even getting to the final entry door of the room required getting past, not 1, not 2, but 8 locked doors within the elaborate labyrinth that Joseph had meticulously planned and built. Upon Elizabeth's disappearance, Joseph and Rosemary reported their missing daughter to the police. Joseph told the police she had run away to join a cult, and that he suspected this was coming when he noticed her growing interest in the occult. However, he was the only one that seemed to think Elizabeth had any interest in cults, as Rosemary and other family members saw such signs. However, police did confirm the previous report where Elizabeth had run away with her co-worker, and because of this, they suspected she had indeed simply run away again. The theory was backed by a letter from Elizabeth, which Joseph forced Elizabeth to write, where she explained that she was tired of living with her family and warned her parents to not look for her or else she'd leave the country. The letter was the final piece that convinced the police that Elizabeth left voluntarily, so they closed the case. Meanwhile, Joseph visited Elizabeth in the underground prison almost daily to bring her food and other supplies. Beginning on her second day of captivity, he also visited almost daily to rape her, sometimes several times per day. Later, Joseph would admit that he distanced himself from what he was doing by never looking Elizabeth in the face when he raped her. After 5 years of Elizabeth living alone in the prison, during which time Joseph would hardly ever even speak to her, the babies started to come. At first, having a baby in the cellar with her was terrifying for Elizabeth, but they also provided much-needed company for her, as well as a purpose for living after so many years where she'd contemplated suicide. Over her 24 years of captivity, Elizabeth gave birth to 7 children by her father. For reasons still unclear, 3 of those children were chosen by Joseph to live openly upstairs with him, his wife, and the rest of the family. Joseph achieved this by placing all 3 of the children on the family porch at different points, along with more letters he'd forced Elizabeth to write. In the letters, she'd state that she was dropping the children off for her parents to take care of because she couldn't handle the responsibility. Of the 4 children relegated to live with Elizabeth in the basement, one of them was born with respiratory issues, and he died shortly after birth. The other 3, Kristen, Stefan, and Felix, remained in the dungeon with Elizabeth. Elizabeth was refused medical attention and was forced to give birth to all 7 children in the basement without any medical assistance. To prepare for them, Joseph provided Elizabeth with disinfectant, a dirty pair of scissors, and a book on childbirth from the 1960s. When Michael, the child with respiratory issues, died, Joseph cremated his body in their oven. Social workers were called to their residence on multiple occasions, considering the way the children were all supposedly left at the door, and Joseph convinced them all of his story. There were, however, several indications that something was awry. When the second child was left on the Fritzl's doorstep, it was Rosemary Fritzl who discovered the child. She reported to a social worker that just before midnight, she heard a baby crying outside the door. She opened the door to find the child laying there in a baby carriage. Just then the phone rang. She answered it, and someone claiming to be Elizabeth was apologizing for leaving her child on their doorstep. Rosemary immediately recognized that the call was a recording and not a live person, so she hung up. But the phone rang again immediately. When she answered the second time, the same message was replayed. In addition to the recording being a concern, Rosemary also noted to the social worker that she found the call odd since they had recently changed their home phone number, and no one should have known the new number at that point. In hindsight, others also noticed signs. Joseph's sister-in-law reported that he would go into the basement every morning at 9 a.m. explaining that he was making blueprints and building new machines to sell to clients. But he warned that no one was ever to bother him or come down into the basement while he was working. The Fritzls also rented out a bedroom in their home, which happened to be directly above the basement. One of the tenants reported he would hear noises at night and would bring his concerns to Joseph. But Joseph would always assure him it was nothing more than faulty pipes and house-settling noises. Another tenant who lived there over a 4-year period noted that his dog would randomly become alert in the middle of the night, sniffing and growling at seemingly nothing. The tenant would look around the house to find whatever his dog was suspicious of, but never found the cellar door or anything of concern. But neither his wife, his family, nor any of the multitude of tenants over the years harbored enough suspicion to report any of Joseph's peculiar actions. Even as he spent more and more time in the basement, was living in a separate area of the home apart from his wife, and would often spend the night in the basement claiming that he was actually away on business trips. Tenants even noticed him bring bags of groceries, building materials, appliances, and furniture into the basement, but still didn't arouse enough suspicion to report anything. Despite the unfortunate circumstances surrounding the births of her children, Elizabeth loved and cared for the 3 children that lived with her as well as she could. Investigators and reporters expressed how impressed and inspired they were by how well Elizabeth managed to raise her kids considering their circumstances. Elizabeth requested that Joseph bring her books regularly so she could teach the children to read and write, and she made sure they learned about the outside world and its culture through the television and radio that Joseph allowed them to keep downstairs. In 1994, after Elizabeth gave birth to a 4th child, Joseph allowed the cramped 380-square-foot prison to be extended to 590 square feet, or just over 50% larger. Once the concealed prison was expanded, it would contain a narrow 16-foot corridor, a storage area, 3 small open cells connected by narrow passageways, 2 sleeping areas equipped with 2 beds each, bathroom facilities, and a basic cooking area. The ceilings were so low they only reached between 5 feet 6 inches, in some areas up to 6 feet at their highest point, a condition that would cause walking problems for Stefan, who ultimately grew to 5 feet 8 inches, but would have to stoop to walk nearly all the time. To achieve the extension, Joseph forced the underground family to dig the walls with their bare hands. He warned them that touching the inside of the cellar door he came down from would electrocute them, and that if they ever tried to escape, they would instantly be gassed. While police confirmed that there was no gas supply to the basement, and that this was likely a threat to scare the family, Joseph punished them in other ways for even the smallest acts of disobedience. On top of the repeated physical and sexual abuse as punishment, he would shut down all the power to the cellar or refuse to bring any food or water, forcing Elizabeth and later her children to live hungry, thirsty, and in total darkness for days at a time. On the 19th of April in 2008, the hellish prison would only be the home of Elizabeth and her 3 kids for 1 more week. On that day, 19-year-old Kristen, one of Elizabeth's 3 children still with her at the time, fell unconscious. For the first time ever, Joseph heeded to Elizabeth's request that medical attention was necessary. So he allowed Elizabeth outside to help him carry Kristen to the car. It was the first time she'd seen the outside world in 24 years. Once Kristen was in the car, Joseph locked Elizabeth back with the other children in the dungeon, then proceeded to the local hospital. Upon arriving at the hospital, doctors were immediately concerned as Kirsten's skin was as white as a ghost. It was so white you could easily see her veins, and some noted that it was nearly transparent. Obviously confused by this, the doctors asked Joseph for the girl's name to look up her and her family's medical history. But to their surprise, Kirsten's name was nowhere to be found in the database. She seemingly didn't exist before now. Upon examination, doctors found that Kristen was in serious condition, suffering from life-threatening kidney failure on top of several other medical issues brought on by a vitamin D deficiency. Joseph frantically told the doctors that Kristen was one of his granddaughters. Her even younger than previously assumed age heightened doctors' concern even more, and they insisted to Joseph that they get in contact with the mother so they could figure out what was going on. The doctors were growing increasingly suspicious of and irritated by Joseph, as he refused to answer almost all important questions or simply danced around them. As their suspicions about Joseph's story mounted, they decided to alert the police on April 21st. In an attempt to contact Elizabeth, the police broadcast a public appeal for her to come forward to provide Kirsten's medical history. They reopened the file on Elizabeth's disappearance from years prior. Joseph stuck with his story that Elizabeth had run away with a colt, and even produced yet another letter that he'd forced her to write from January of that year, which was postmarked in the town of Kemeton. Police contacted an expert on colts who was highly suspicious of both the seemingly dictated and oddly written letter, as well as the supposed colt, which he felt didn't exist. In the meantime, Elizabeth begged Joseph to allow her to go to the hospital. A week later, on April 26th, Joseph allowed Elizabeth to come with him to the hospital with strict instructions for her to stick to the fabricated story or face the consequences. He also allowed the 2 remaining children to be taken to the upstairs home while they went to the hospital. When they arrived at the hospital, Joseph and Elizabeth were immediately detained by police and separated for questioning. Elizabeth was initially reluctant and fearful, talking very quietly and avoiding eye contact. The doctors and authorities' first suspicion was that Elizabeth was an abusive mother and that her treatment and neglect of her daughter was the cause of Kirsten's health issues. But they quickly began questioning that theory once they saw that Elizabeth shared the same ghostly features of white hair and pale white skin. Elizabeth remained unwilling to cooperate until the police granted her her only request, that she never has to see her father again. Once police agreed, she told them everything. Over the next hours, she recounted her 24 years in captivity, including the secret dungeon, the constant physical and sexual abuse dating back even before her imprisonment, the multiple children, the fact that some of them were taken from her, and even unfathomable details like how he used to force her to watch adult films and then reenact them with him in front of their children to humiliate her and scar the children. Police forced Joseph to give them the key code to his electrical lock and immediately began investigating the home and basement. On the same night he and Elizabeth came to the hospital, Joseph, 73 years old at the time, was arrested and taken into custody. 3 days later, on April 29th, DNA evidence confirmed that Elizabeth was telling the truth, and that all 6 of Elizabeth's remaining kids were biologically Joseph's. Police also planned to interview every person that had rented the extra bedroom in the house, with the number of former tenants totaling over 100. During the investigation, police found the many letters that Joseph forced Elizabeth to write, one of which seemingly implied that he was planning on releasing her from the basement the following year. The letter stated that she wanted to come home, but that it wasn't possible for her to do so just yet. Police believed and Joseph confirmed that his plan was to free her, but tell everyone in the outside world that he had actually rescued her from the cult she had run away to. He felt he was growing too old to care for his second family underground, and was hatching what he felt was a viable transition plan. Once police began interrogating Joseph, he confessed to everything. He claimed that he simply lived a second life in the basement with his daughter, and that while he may have been forcing her to stay in the basement, the details of their relationship were all consensual. He claimed that the media painted him out to be a monster, but that in reality, he and his second family enjoyed spending time together, and he had a good relationship with Elizabeth and their kids. Despite these false claims, he does admit that something in him was aware that everything he was doing was wrong, but he became so used to his secondary life underground that he didn't care. He acknowledged that what prompted him to keep Elizabeth locked up in the basement is that she no longer adhered to any rules in her teenage years, and that he needed to keep her safe from the outside world by force if he thought necessary. But even though he made statements like that, positioning himself as her protector, he'd also make statements that reflected quite the opposite. He admitted that the decades without sunshine or medical and dental care caused a profoundly negative effect on his daughter's health, stating, "Elizabeth remains strong. She never complains, even as her teeth slowly rot and come out of her mouth one by one. She suffers day and night with unbearable pain and can't sleep." By the time Elizabeth had arrived at the hospital that fateful day, each and every one of her teeth had excruciatingly rotted out of her mouth. Joseph admitted that the reason he wanted to force Elizabeth into carrying all of these children is because of his obsession with being in control. He wanted to own Elizabeth like a piece of property and made sure that he could do so in every way possible. On the off chance she escaped his dungeon of horrors, he was hoping he could get her pregnant as many times as possible so future partners would be scared off by the large number of children she had, and she'd hopefully be led back to him out of desperation. During Joseph's prison stint for his earlier rape conviction, he admitted that he planned to lock his daughter up so that he could contain and express his evil side. After his arrest, analysts reported that he stated, "I was born to rape, and I held myself back for a relatively long time. I could have behaved a lot worse than locking up my daughter." Analysts surmised that Joseph's deviant behavior was likely fueled by his upbringing by a toxic mother and father who abandoned them. While Joseph used to speak very highly of his mother, he eventually came to share the truth, which is that she hated him, abused him, beat him until he was laying in a pile of his own blood, and even compared him to Satan. Despite his fear of his mother, he actually let her move into the house with him and Rosemary back in 1959. But at that time, the roles became reversed, and his mom was facing Joseph's abusive personality on a daily basis. This all culminated in Joseph locking her up in the attic and telling everyone that she had died all the way up until she actually did. Police now think that he could have held his mom prisoner for about 20 years before dying in his captivity. To adhere to the agreement that Elizabeth would never have to see her father again, she gave videotaped testimony presented to Austrian prosecutors and investigators in July 2008. Later that month, the trial for Joseph began. He faced 10 years for the negligent homicide charge of Michael, the infant who died shortly after birth, as well as a maximum of 20 years for rape, incest, kidnapping, false imprisonment, and enslavement. On the first day of the trial, Joseph pleaded guilty to all charges except for the negligent homicide and grievous assault, brought on by threatening to gas his captives if they disobeyed him. His defense attorney encouraged the jury to not be swayed by their emotions and insisted his client was not a monster, citing that he brought a Christmas tree down to his captives during the holidays. The prosecution pressed for life imprisonment in an institution for the criminally insane. She demonstrated with markings on the wall how low the height of the ceiling in the dungeon was, as well as how damp and moldy it was, passing around musty objects from the cellar, causing the jurors to flinch from the odor. Jurors watched nearly 11 hours of taped testimony from Elizabeth in total, broken down into 2-hour sessions, because the details were so harrowing they couldn't bear more than 2 hours of the testimony at a time. Elizabeth's brother also testified about Yosef's abuse, but his wife Rosemary and the other children from the cellar refused to testify. Elizabeth attended day 2 of the trial. She'd actually attended in disguise the day prior in preparation for a book she'd planned to write about her ordeal. But on this second day of the trial, Yosef recognized that she was in court. Yosef and Elizabeth's eyes met, and Yosef went pale and broke down. The following day of the trial, he immediately approached the judge and changed his plea to guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility for parole after 15 years. He accepted the sentence and stated he would not appeal. Once the trial was over, Elizabeth and her 6 children were given new identities and a new home where they could enjoy their freedom, but still be afforded privacy. All of the 6 children require ongoing therapy. The upstairs children had been traumatized by both Yosef's abuse, as well as learning that he lied to them about their mother abandoning them. And the downstairs children dealt with the obvious trauma of being deprived of normal development, fresh air, and sunshine, as well as the extreme mental, physical, and sexual abuse they received or witnessed by Yosef. Additionally, all 6 children may face genetic issues inherent to children born of an incestuous relationship. Elizabeth allows her 3 children, who grew up in Yosef and Rosemary's house, to visit their grandmother regularly. Elizabeth is said to have been estranged from her mother for believing her father's story about her whereabouts and not questioning it. However, over time, she came to forgive her mother, and they have a strong relationship now. In 2013, work began to fill the basement of the old Fritzl home with concrete. The home would ultimately sell 3 years later to buyers who turned the building into apartments. Josef Fritzl was remanded to a special prison unit for the criminally insane in Austria's Kremstein prison, where he is to serve out his sentence. In May 2017, Josef Fritzl changed his name to Josef Merhoff. Unconfirmed reports claim it was due to fights in prison, one of which resulted in several of his teeth getting knocked out. A British journalist, Mark Perry, interviewed Fritzl in his prison cell and reported that he has shown no remorse for his crimes. He quoted Josef as saying, "Just look into the cellars of other people. You might find other families and girls down there." In April 2019, Josef's health was said to be declining. He's suffering from dementia, and he doesn't want to live anymore. It's also reported that he is withdrawn, doesn't want anything to do with his fellow inmates, and likewise, they don't want anything to do with Austria's most infamous convict. In 2021, a regional court ordered the 87-year-old Fritzl to an alternative penitentiary, essentially moving him from a psychiatric prison to a standard prison. That decision was based on a psychiatric report that stated he no longer posed any danger. However, a higher regional court in Vienna ruled that there were no convincing indications that Fritzl was no longer a danger and therefore must remain in a secure psychiatric facility. Had Fritzl been moved out of the psychiatric prison, he would be eligible to apply for parole after having served 15 years, which is scheduled to occur in 2023. So as of the making of this video in 2023, Fritzl remains in a psychiatric prison where he remains ineligible for parole. Thank you so much for watching. We hope this video did justice to Elizabeth and all her precious children. We can only imagine the amount of fortitude and courage it must have taken to stand up to and speak out against a force that had so brutally ruled over every aspect of her life for 24 years. Her strength is an inspiration. Case 4. It was Sunday, September 17, 2023, when police were dispatched to a family home for a welfare check. The call came in at 8:43 p.m. Zoraida Bartholomew, 32 years old, hadn't answered her mother's phone calls all day. This was unusual. Her mother always checked in about the kids, and Zoraida was quick to respond. But this day was different. To make matters worse, Zoraida's husband, 38-year-old Alberto Rolón, hadn't shown up for his 6 a.m. shift that morning either. 2 alarming details from a couple known for being responsible and reliable. As officers approached the house, they discussed the family, a household of 4, including 2 young boys, 10-year-old Adriel and 7-year-old Diego, and 3 dogs. But something about the scene struck them as odd. In a home with 3 dogs, you'd expect barking or some movement. Instead, there was nothing but dead silence. The family moved into the home just a few months earlier, a beautiful property with a backyard, the neighborhood of Romeoville, a southwestern suburb of Chicago. Zoraida's mother, deeply worried, had requested the welfare check. Zoraida's brother was also on his way to check on her. In hindsight, It might have been a blessing that the officers arrived first. What they discovered inside would haunt any family member. The arrival of the officers immediately knew something was wrong. The lights were off, the house was unusually quiet, and no one was responding to the door. The officers peered through several windows with their flashlights. Romeoville, 327, can we get another unit to Camden, please? Everything's 10 to 4. No, we're gonna go on that side. There's a gate over there. Hey, hold on. Are you looking as well? Oh, that's all the shit. Here, wait, keep shining. Oh, wait. Lights are all off. Freaking out. There's a. Go in the backyard real quick. Furthermore, keep an eye on that garage, yeah? I want to try that door real quick. See if you can speak in the back. Is that one alright? Yeah. I'll go with this one. This one was open. I need more units here. Need more units, yeah. Hold this. I got 2 dead dogs. He was knocked over, and a cop knocked over in the front room. They made a decision to enter the house. However, they had to proceed with caution, as they didn't know who or what might still be inside. I'm waiting for at least one more to make entry. One officer retrieved a riot shield as a precaution. We're going to make entry through the back door. You go grab the rifle. Yeah, I'm going to be your lethal cover, Ron. He later handed the shield to another officer and grabbed his rifle. No worries, I'm going to force entry from the back. Cover, please. I don't know if anybody's in there or not. Hey, you know what? Hey, one of you guys hold the front. We're on the other side, George, right? No, not that I know of. Here we go. Hey, Ron. Yeah, here's what we're going to do, okay? I'm going to boot in. We're going to go nice and slow, alright? Drake, you stay behind me. You stay in the back of the stack. You watch our 6 as we move through the house, okay? Corey, come up here and cover this door. This window. Cover the window. What do you see, Corey? How many dead dogs you got? We got 1 dead dog right here. We got a 2nd dead dog. I got him. I got him. Why don't you check the door handle first? Once inside, they discovered a horrifying scene. All 3 family dogs were dead, each shot in the head. The dogs had clawed desperately at the front door in their final moments, trying to escape. The husband, Roland, was found next. He was lying dead in the hallway, multiple bullet wounds in his body, and a pool of blood surrounding him. He had been shot in the back, suggesting he was trying to run. The most horrifying discovery was made in the bedroom. The door had been kicked open, and evidence of a struggle suggested Zarita had tried to fight off her attacker, or attackers, before being overwhelmed. She was found with her hands covering her face in a final gesture of terror, shot multiple times, and left in a pool of blood. The most heartbreaking of all was the fate of the couple's 2 young boys, too innocent to have caused anyone harm. They had been murdered in their beds. Zarita must have done her best to protect them before she was overpowered. Shell casings littered the house, as though the murderers were carried out quickly and violently. The execution-style killing suggested the perpetrator knew exactly where to go and who to target. No one was spared, not the children, not the pets. The killers had left a message, the letter F spray-painted on the walls. Could this have been a drug cartel hit deep in the American Midwest? Such brutality was not expected in an otherwise peaceful neighborhood. When Zarita's brother arrived, he was stunned by the police presence and devastated by the news. He now had the heartbreaking and daunting task of informing their mother that her daughter's entire family had been murdered in cold blood. There's no right way to deliver such news. It's unimaginable what that moment must have felt like. Initially, investigators wondered if this was a murder-suicide, since Roland was not found in the bedroom with his wife and children. However, this theory was quickly ruled out, due to the multiple gunshot wounds in his back, indicating he had been fleeing. The claw marks and animal feces near the door revealed the dogs had sensed the violence taking place. In their final moments, they were in a state of panic and terror, likely killed last. Authorities estimated the murders occurred between 9 p.m. Saturday and 5 a.m. Sunday. They believed the attack was targeted, meant to send a clear and brutal message. People's response. The family members were devastated. No one could fathom who could commit such a heinous act. Both Roland and Zarita held decent jobs, were not in financial trouble, and had no history or involvement with drugs or gangs. They didn't even own firearms, suggesting they hadn't anticipated any danger. The murder seemed random, senseless, and deeply evil. The Romeoville police enlisted the help of the FBI, ATF, and DEA, suspecting the crime resembled the style of a cartel hit. Neighbors were equally shocked. Devastated this happened to a young family. The fact that nobody heard anything, and these houses are pretty close together, is very sinister. This is devastating to me. I mean, I've been crying on and off all day. Just a young family trying to do better. I'm sorry. It's horrible. It's tragic. It's unfair. The boys were beloved at their school, Robert C. Hill Elementary. Their classmates and teachers struggled to cope with the devastating news of their death. Zoraida's sister took to social media, pleading for information. I want to know what happened to my nephews, my sister, her husband, and why. Early investigation pending the detailed forensics. Police were looking for any form of lead or suspect. Through early questioning of the family, detectives learned that Zoraida had been having an affair with a colleague at work. Now, this wasn't an exceptional case. In the past, Zoraida had had other affairs, but after confessing to her husband, they managed to work it out and move forward. This time, however, it was different. She was reportedly madly in love with a coworker, 32-year-old Nathaniel Huey Jr. They had been seeing each other since May 2023, when they were both working at Avanti Engineering, a machined parts manufacturer. Zoraida had confided in her sister that Huey was her soulmate. She was the Juliet to his Romeo. On September 18, 2023, the day after the horrifying discovery at the Romeoville residence, police went to speak to 32-year-old Nathaniel Huey Jr. at his workplace at Avanti Engineering. Zoraida's sister was correct. Police found a post-it note at Huey's workstation, which appeared to be written in Zoraida's handwriting. It read, "The whole affair seemed to be an ill-kept secret." Perhaps they didn't really care about keeping it under the wraps, considering how a post-it note was just in plain sight at Huey's workstation. In fact, Zoraida's husband knew of some of her affairs, but chose to ignore or deal with them privately, because, reportedly, keeping the family together was more important than infidelity between spouses. In some odd way, that seemed like a noble cause, but to others it might seem like being a pushover, something no one should just tolerate or sweep under the rug. Back to the questioning. The detectives began by telling Nathan they were aware of the affair, but that's not why they were here, and that's not their concern. We're just trying to figure out where. Alright, what kind of car do you drive? Like a SUV? So, and you said you've never had contact with her husband? Like he's never sent you a message, or called you or contacted you? No. Alright, so your first name's Nate. What's your last name? Can you spell it for me? Is it Nathaniel? What's your birthday? I don't remember anymore. I'm not trying to ruin your marriage or life, so I'm not like, I'm gonna, I'll try to keep this if we can, so I'm just with us in this room talking, but we're trying to figure out what happened at that house. Did she say her husband cheated on her, or did she say she never even passed or anything? And I gotta ask, do you have anything to do with this? No. Okay, I have to ask, and you know that your number's gonna be in her phone, and we're gonna find your text messages, and we're gonna find that stuff, and I don't want to get surprised later on that you guys are fighting, or that there was something going on between you two, or just three or few that I don't know about, Something like that. We have tons of videos to go through, and license plates, readers, and text messages, Snapchat messages, and all that stuff. In your head, if you can think of something like, oh, you guys should know about this, it's the time to tell us now before we find it later on, in the computer, when we find it in a phone message or something. Nathan paused. Of course he doesn't want to hand over his phone, which could have flirtatious messages with the woman who just passed away. Also notice how the detectives asked him about his vehicle and model number. Furthermore, if he had any kind of confrontation with her husband, the detectives seemed to know more than they're letting on. So, we were talking with the bosses, and they said, well, we already went through the phones, they've already got one half of the conversation. And you said you talked to her on your phone, right? What we'd like, or what we're asking for, is consent to get the text messages off your phone between you and her, or the Snapchat, or whatever it is between you, so we have both sides of it. Trying to eliminate you as a suspect, they've seen better. So I believe them. Oh, from this morning? It'll be on there. It'll be on your phone. So let's just say you've got a 64 gig phone. You use about 58 of it. The rest is a catch. It stays in the catch. We'd like to see if we can get the stuff from your end. On our side of it, we can get a search warrant, to go through the phone, and it'll just take a little longer. The fastest way would be consent, pull it off, and move your phone back. I explained to you earlier, I'm trying to eliminate you. We have a deceased girl, and her last boyfriend, or whatever is you. I'm sure that if there's an outsider looking in, who's your suspect? So, I'd like to eliminate that. I'd like to say, well, we looked through stuff, he didn't have nothing to do with it, we're done with it. It would take us a couple hours to pull information off the phone, that could eliminate you as a suspect. Like, right from the start. It's up to you. Anytime somebody dies, you look at the husband, the boyfriend. If it's a girl, if it's a guy, you look at his wife, and any kind of lovers he had. That's what we look at, we start there. And then this person was at work, so we eliminate that. This person was, we went through the phone, there's nothing between those two. And you're telling us there's no threats, but I can't go to our boss. I can't go to a state attorney and say, no, I verified it, there's no threats. I don't get with my phone, I'm telling you this. I completely understand what you're saying. I've been trying to get here, it's a hard time, taking my phone and all that. And you already told me you can get it. Her side of it, I can't get your side, that's the problem. How about this? How about I come see you guys later today, after work or something like that? Because I don't know, I still want you to be like, looking at, you know what I'm saying? I promise you, I don't care what you look at. Again, I'm asking for consent. The consent means that we plug it right in, we dump it, because you've told us it's okay. Without that, then we have to get a search warrant. If we get a search warrant, then we have to type that up, and it's going to take longer. I can bring it down to you guys, and you can dump it all you want to. I mean, you do understand how that kind of defeats the purpose, though. Like, we're looking for, like Snapchat stuff, and then you delete Snapchat stuff. It's kind of, you look like you're guilty, you know what I'm saying? Nathan's past. Looking into Nathan, police learned he had previously owned a private security firm, Black Bear Security, and he wasn't a single man either. In fact, he was married to a woman a few years older than him. Her name was Linda, and they had been together for 8 years. While the couple had a wedding ceremony, they weren't legally married, but would refer to each other as husband and wife. They lived in the same house, had a dog, and Linda had children and grandchildren of her own. Nathan, too, had children of his own. And similar to Zoraida, Nathan had reportedly cheated on Linda more than once in their relationship. It just seems strange that these habitual cheaters were living steady, committed relationships. Perhaps they just enjoyed the excitement of affairs. However, unlike Zoraida's husband, Nathan was a known gun enthusiast, as stated by Linda's family. Linda's interview. The police went over to speak to his live-in partner and wife, Linda Palomo, 50 years of age and 18 years older than Nathaniel. She acted surprised, but the police mentioned that they had seen some messages and wanted to speak to her, as they believed she was in danger. Watch how it unfolded. If you're one of my regular viewers, then you already know we're going to revisit this one. We're pretty clear that somebody's pretty upset at the victim. Is there any way that these text messages are going to come back to you, or your name, or your phone, or anything associated with that? As Linda goes inside to grab her jacket, Nathaniel is seen leaving the house. And this is the point that the detectives are trying to make. They're trying to separate the two so they can question them in private. Notice how they have a dog. I'm going to cry. It's all right. It's not all right. I'm saying it's okay if you cry. Do you want to go to the street with the police department? Is that down the street or no? It's right here by the park. Can you do a U-turn parking in front of the park? Sunnydale Park? Okay. How long have you known Huey? Since probably 2015. Okay. Why are you scared of him? I'm not scared of him. Why are you scared right now? Because when I called him, because I was scared, I didn't know where he was. He said, someone's following me. So I called, and I called. And then I heard him say, why are you following me? Do you want to search the car? And then someone said to him, there are messages from you. And it's because her husband found out you were having an affair. And I didn't know that. You didn't know what? That he was having an affair. When did you find that out? Right now. Right now. Okay. When's the last time that he had an affair? Because I know this is not the first time. No, it's not. When's the last time you knew he had an affair? When we first started dating. 2015? 2015 to maybe 17. You know what? His son was born, and he said, I'm not having any more affairs. I'm not cheating on you. Okay. Stupidly. Okay, so the last time you knew. So then I had a party at my house. I fell asleep, and apparently he said someone kissed him. And that was so I don't know, maybe it was 2019. And he said, no, she kissed me, and that was it. Come on. We're all drunk. You know him better than we do. So, he said that he is no longer going to do that. Why? I'm upset. Do you know any of the names of the affairs that he's had in the past? Any of the female names? Well, he had recently said, I haven't been with a lot of people. Do you trust him? Obviously, I can't trust him, no, can I? When you find out about him, do you guys get in arguments? Do you talk to the women that he's having affairs with? No, for what? No, I'm too old for that. I'm 50 years old. There's no reason for me to, no. Quite honestly, it's not the female's fault. It's his fault. Right. No. You get upset over it. Well, yeah, I'm trying to hold it back right now. But like I said, I thought we went through years. I said to him, "Are you cheating on me?" And he said, "No, you know what? They flirt with me, but I don't fall into that." Does he own guns? No. He has that. He goes to Milwaukee. It's airsoft. He does airsoft stuff? Yeah, he does airsoft. He's in a team. Do you guys have water? This is a sealed bread rink. I'm not taking that from you. How sure are you that he doesn't have a gun? I'm actually very positive. Okay. You've never, ever seen him with a gun? Well, we go to the ranch and we'll shoot. So he has a Ford car? No, he does not. I have a Ford car. Do you own any gun? Yes. Have you ever met Zoraida? No. Have you seen a picture of her? No. That name comes up to you because you saw it. Well, really, that name stuck in my head because that night I thought, are you cheating on me? They're calling him more than once. And it was a long name. I thought it was Bartholomew, actually. So when we asked your husband if he knew this person, Zoraida, he said, I've never heard that name. Why would he be lying to us? I don't know. Should I believe him? I don't know. Please don't tell him I told you. We're not going to tell him anything. I thought that you guys said to him he was having an affair. Somebody said he's having an affair. We have a matter of someone lost their life. So him having an affair is the least of my worries. Suck it up. It's not your problem. I get it. You didn't do it. He did. I understand. Okay. I know. I talk a lot. And I know what you guys are here for something else. And I'm making it about cheating. And it's not. You're trying to find out if he killed the husband? We're trying to find out who was involved. So we're talking to everyone. We're talking to you. We're talking to him. We're talking to other people. Because as you may be aware, people like to the police. Right? What I would like to ask you is, either Friday or Saturday night, did he go out with his friends? No. He didn't work. Friday night, he was with me. Saturday night? No. Okay. This is what happened. When I get a chance to be with him, I'm with him. Okay. So Friday night, we started drinking. And we were at home. And we were drinking and drinking and drinking. We drink a lot. We probably fell asleep. He sleeps in the garage. I sleep in my room. And why does he sleep in the garage? Because he says that he's more comfortable in the garage. Is there a bed in there? No. It's a couch. I know. But that's not why we're here. And I don't mean to be rude. No, you're not being rude at all. So we were drinking. We woke up and we were hungover. On Saturday? He said, we got to move. I said, I really want to go to Ross. I want to buy some jeans. And then he said, let's get something to eat. He said, okay, let's go to Jersey Mix. It was still day. And I got home. I fell asleep. Apparently, I woke up and yelled at everybody. He was with the kids playing. My daughter had said to me, did you wake up in the middle of the night? And I said, no, why? And she said, well, I was just wondering because you were yelling at everybody. And it seemed like you were just sleeping. And I think I heard you talking in your sleep. I said, no, I didn't. And then I said, maybe it was Nate that was talking in his sleep. And she said, no, Nate was snoring. Well, at least she's talking. But you know the old proverb, empty vessels make the most noise. Okay, if you were to leave in the middle of the night, one day, would it be safe to say that you probably would have not known? No, I think everybody knows when he leaves. Because when you slam our door, the front door, you don't even have to slam it. You hear it. And the house is, it's fragile. You wouldn't be covering for Nate at all. No, he was here. Even my daughter said he was here. Additional forensics. Through some brilliant detective work, using Ring doorbells along the route, cell towers, and flock camera systems, police were able to track a suspect vehicle around the route from Streamwood, where Nathan and Irma Linda resided, to Romeoville at the suspected time of the family massacre. And what a surprise to find. The vehicle belonged to Nathaniel Huey Jr. with Nathan as their lead suspect. The question arose, what motive would Nathan have to brutally massacre an entire family execution style of the woman he was having an affair with at work? The woman who loved him and called him Romeo to her Juliet. Well, this is where the story starts to get crazy. The next day, on September 19th, 2023, Irma Linda's family received a strange text from her at around 4:30 p.m. Take care of my grandbabies. They sensed something was wrong and were unable to contact her. Using a family tracker app, they were able to follow her movements for a while until that night. when her phone and the app were turned off. For her family, the situation was a nightmare. A mother of 5 and grandmother of 5, Irma Linda's sudden departure was out of character. Her family filed a missing persons report and hired a lawyer, fearing she had been abducted by Nathaniel. Their concerns were magnified by Nathaniel's erratic behavior. According to one of Irma Linda's daughters, he was intensely paranoid. He claimed people were constantly watching him, going so far as to tape over the lens of their doorbell camera and even the red light on their television. If anyone removed the tape, he would lash out in anger. Nathaniel also had a troubling past, a criminal history, including a court order barring him from owning firearms. Now, the family feared he had violated that order and abducted Irma Linda. Police, without specifying why at the time, considered both Nathaniel and Irma Linda persons of interest. The hunt was on to find them, as it was believed that they had fled state and were possibly trying to leave the country. September 20th, 2023. The final chapter. By the next day, law enforcement had tracked down the fugitive couple. The breakthrough came when a flock camera flagged Nathaniel and Irma Linda's vehicle near a Walmart in Catoosa, Oklahoma. Surveillance footage showed the pair walking into the store together, side by side. But what stood out was their casual demeanor. They browsed the electronics and makeup aisles as if nothing was wrong, even smiling and laughing at times. It was clear that Irma Linda wasn't being held against her will. I don't know about you guys, but this is not how I think a kidnapping victim is supposed to act. I mean, he walked out of Walmart with those big pearly whites, and she seems pretty happy and even playful with the woman who works there. Just have a look. She's swinging the bag. I'm guessing the beeper went off, and after a few jokes, they leave. Outside, Catoosa officers were already waiting at the parking lot. Officers moved in, but Nathaniel and Irma Linda bolted, leading police on a high-speed chase down an Oklahoma interstate. The pursuit ended in catastrophe when their GMC slammed into the center divider and burst into flames. I'm fired. Get out of the car. What happened next was equally horrifying. What? I'm afraid of murder-suicide. As the vehicle burned, Nathaniel shot Irma Linda in the head. Then, in a desperate act, he turned the gun on himself. His first attempt, under his chin, failed, so he fired again. This time, he ended his life. Oklahoma police, fully aware of Huey's status as an armed and dangerous murder suspect from Illinois, approached the burning vehicle cautiously. I got door. Do not see movement. No movement. Get out. Get out. Get out. Get out now. Come out now. I don't see anything. Got your cover. Nothing. Floorboard. Floorboard. You got that door? Behind you. You got that? Move into your left. Go ahead. Go ahead. God dang. What's that? You got to get him out, or I can't see him. Driver's still in. Passenger got. We got her out. We had to remove her from the vehicle. So we're working on her back there. He did shoot her. She's the missing person, endangered. He's the murder suspect. Yeah. Irma Linda was rushed to the hospital, but succumbed to her injuries the next day. With both Nathaniel and Irma Linda dead, questions about the Romeoville family massacre remained unanswered. The twist. After the fiery crash, the case seemed closed. Nathaniel Huey Jr., a deranged murderer, had died in a desperate escape attempt. But a year-long investigation would uncover a truth far more sinister. Irma Linda Palomo, once thought to be a victim, the grieving grandmother manipulated by Nathaniel, was no victim at all. In fact, police revealed she was the true mastermind behind the massacre. What unraveled was a dark tale of jealousy and manipulation, and a catfishing scheme that spanned 2 years, beginning in December 2021. Using an array of fake accounts and phone numbers generated through mobile apps, Irma Linda constructed a fictional world where Nathaniel was ensnared in a web of lies involving cartel bosses, hitmen, hackers, and a shadowy Bulgarian criminal organization. The manipulation begins. At first, Irma Linda's fake personas were seemingly harmless, intended to keep Nathaniel from cheating on her or pulling away emotionally. Interestingly, these cartel leaders were very interested in Nathan's private life. They forbade him from seeing other women, and even instructed him to be more intimate with Irma Linda. But over time, the lies escalated, feeding into Nathaniel's growing paranoia. Through meticulously crafted messages, Irma Linda convinced Nathaniel that he was constantly being watched by dangerous people, and any misstep could cost him his life. Even her own daughter later admitted, by September 2023, Nathaniel was fully consumed by his delusion. He believed his every move was monitored by the cartel. Then, on September 14th, 2023, one of Irmelinda's fake personas sent Nathaniel a chilling text. It claimed there was a mole within the organization, a traitor targeting Nathaniel. The identity of the mole: Zoraida Bartholome. In a web of lies Irmelinda spun, Zoraida wasn't just a lover or co-worker, she was an enemy. According to this fabricated cartel narrative, had been orchestrated to gain Nathaniel's trust and expose secrets about the cartel. Now, the bosses insisted Zoraida had to be eliminated, and they even introduced him to a fictional cartel assassin named Turtle, who would help him plan the murder. Over the following days, Nathaniel spiraled deeper into this deadly conspiracy. He called in sick to work and began meticulously preparing for the crime. Following step-by-step instructions sent by the fake cartel accounts, they planned everything, such as identifying cameras in the neighborhood, determining the best entry and exit points, learning about the vacant house behind Zoraida's home, and even staging the crime scene to look like a burglary by teenagers. Throughout it all, Irmelinda's fake cartel reassured Nathaniel many murders go unsolved. In the early hours of September 17, 2023, Irmelinda drove Nathaniel to the Bartholomew residence, communicating via walkie-talkies. He stayed nearby while Nathaniel entered the home with a 9mm handgun. What followed was a calculated act of brutality. Nathaniel cut window screens to simulate a break-in, then entered through an unlocked kitchen door. Alberto Bartholomew, likely up early to prepare for his early morning shift, was the first to meet Alberto. He was met with gunfire. Nathaniel shot Alberto multiple times as he tried to retreat to his bedroom, where Zoraida and the children were sleeping. When he approached the bedroom door, Zoraida was doing her best to keep it shut, but Nathaniel shot through the door, striking and killing Zoraida before forcing his way inside to murder her two young sons, Adriel and Diego. Together, the family was shot a total of 20 times. The scene was then staged in a grotesque attempt to mislead investigators. Walls were spray-painted with graffiti meant to mimic the senseless vandalism of juvenile delinquents. Even the family's 3 dogs were slaughtered, 2 in the kitchen and 1 in a bedroom. After the murders, Nathaniel texted the cartel, reporting the killings, but admitting he'd forgotten to take the victims' cell phones. This final interaction further cemented his belief that he was acting under the orders of a powerful organization. In reality, the puppet master was sitting a short distance away in the car, Irmelinda Palomo, the woman whose jealousy had driven her to orchestrate a massacre. Nathaniel later confessed to his mother, claiming he'd committed the killings because people were after him. When asked why he murdered the children, his chilling response was, they were better off dead than alive without parents. Now, could this have been prevented? In the months leading up to the Romeoville massacre, there were glaring red flags. Yet, the signs were ignored, dismissed, or left unreported to authorities. By June 2023, a mere month into Nathaniel Huey Jr. and Zoraida Bartholomew's relationship, threatening messages began surfacing. These messages warned Zoraida to stay away from Nathaniel, claiming he was about to be implicated in a murder investigation. They accused her of endangering her children by continuing to see him. Zoraida's defiant response revealed her frustration and resilience. You don't know anything about me as a mother or a person. Then the threats escalated. On June 27, 2023, Irmelinda Palomo, posing as an anonymous source, contacted Alberto Roland directly. The message claimed Zoraida was cheating on him with Nathaniel and urged Alberto to confront his wife. Palomo's manipulations grew more personal and malicious, painting Nathaniel as a violent individual whose presence endangered Alberto's family. In July 2023, Alberto received even more messages, but he refused to defuse the situation. Instead, he pleaded with the messenger to just leave him alone. All I want to do is work and go home and be with my kids. I'm not a complicated person, and I don't need or deserve all this drama. Tensions boiled over into an altercation. Alberto allegedly slashed Nathaniel's tires. However, in a gesture of remorse, he later apologized. He paid for the damages and just urged Nathaniel to stay away from his wife. But Zoraida was not letting go. Her messages became more threatening and explicit as the weeks passed. She sent a dire warning to Alberto. The mother of your children is putting them in danger, and she knows this. Huey has rifles and guns he carries with him. Less than 2 weeks before the murder, Alberto received a haunting text. This will be the last I say of this, Alberto. This stupid girl will be the reason you have no children. Now, despite these threats, there is no record of Zoraida or Alberto reporting them to the police. Zoraida confided in a coworker about the escalating harassment, admitting she was scared for her family's safety. Yet, even this revelation was not relayed to authorities. Now guys, do you remember this part? Well, clearly you did, you lying, cold-hearted, jealous, manipulative killer. And by the way, how stupid is Huey to fall for this? At the end, he cared more about himself than even the lives of kids and an entire family. So much for the macho man image you tried to convey. He's dumber than a rock, and any semblance of sympathy I might have for him got completely washed away by his crimes. At the end, it's somewhat ironic that the killer Irma Linda turned Huey into to protect their relationship was the one who ended up taking her life. This is Victor, and remember, there's a lot of evil in this world. And that's why, sometimes you must be that light in the darkness. Case 5. Enter Emily Shores, a young nursing assistant with an amazing singing voice. She met Joseph Ferlazzo, a tattoo artist. And like many love stories, it all happened very fast. Within weeks of dating, the couple moved into an apartment in Essex Junction, Vermont, in August 2020. Just 2 months later, in October 2020, they were married. At 22 years old, Emily Ferlazzo had a 2-decade age gap with her 41-year-old husband, Joseph. She worked as a licensed nursing assistant, but dreamed of one day becoming a cosmetologist. When they met, Joseph was struggling financially. He had no permanent residence and was couch surfing at the time. But after their marriage, things seemed to take a turn for the better. Drawn to the idea of freedom and cost-saving benefits, the couple embraced van life. They even purchased a Chevrolet Express shuttle bus and transformed it into a camper they named Rosie. It was supposed to be a symbol of a new beginning. But you'll see, Rosie had a very grim significance later. After 1 year of marriage, Emily and Joseph Ferlazzo planned a trip to Vermont to celebrate their anniversary. Emily was thrilled. She really looked forward to meeting Joseph's sister, Nicole, for the first time. Emily's mother recalled Emily being in high spirits as they packed up their belongings and their dog, Remington, before leaving New Hampshire on Friday evening, October 15, 2021. But by Monday, October 18th, Joseph Ferlazzo returned to New Hampshire alone. He didn't drive the camper van. Instead, he arrived on his motorcycle to Emily's parents' house at 6 p.m. Adrian immediately sensed something was off. Joseph appeared visibly shaken, but she assumed it was from the cold after riding his bike. She encouraged him to take a hot shower, though her mind was already racing with questions. Where was Emily? Why had he returned without her or the RV? Before stepping into the bathroom, Joseph handed her Emily's driver's license. The gesture sent alarm bells ringing through her mind. Why was he carrying her license? Why hadn't Emily returned with him? When Joseph emerged, Adrian and her husband, David Bass, were waiting. They pressed him for answers. Joseph explained that he and Emily argued inside the camper van around 1 p.m. on Saturday. According to him, Emily stormed out and began walking along Route 2 near the Bolton Valley Resort Access Road. He claimed he wanted to give her space and left briefly to visit a nearby store. When he returned, Emily was gone. Joseph said he searched the area but couldn't find her, believing she might need more time to cool off. He assumed she'd find her way back home, perhaps by Uber. But now, 2 days had passed with no word of Emily. She had effectively ghosted him. Listening to his story, Adrian and David were immediately concerned, and they called the police right away, at 7:15 in fact, with Joseph still present. After dinner, Joseph left the Bass household, but not before sharing his phone's location with David. David insisted this was simply a gesture to ensure Joseph made it back safely. Interestingly, when Joseph left, he didn't leave the way he came. Instead of taking his motorcycle, he drove off in his red Jeep Wrangler, another vehicle that was parked at the property. Also, before he left, Adrian and David pressed him about the RV's whereabouts. Joseph gave vague, inconsistent answers. The entire interaction felt strange, as though retrieving the Jeep was his priority, not explaining Emily's disappearance. Keep that detail in mind. It will matter later. Adrian kept in contact with the police. In fact, she had told the investigators that her daughter had been a victim of domestic violence before. She feared Joseph knew far more than he was revealing. Adding to their alarm, Emily's social media had been completely inactive since the trip began. In fact, the last message Emily sent to her family was a simple Facebook message at 8:13 p.m. on October 15th. It would be the final trace of her before she vanished. According to the Facebook location data, Emily's last known whereabouts were logged at 10:14 p.m. that same evening. Growing increasingly concerned, Emily's mother also contacted Vermont State Police, providing them with Joseph Ferlazzo's number. And at 7:33 p.m. on October 18th, Trooper Cody called Joseph. "So where did you drop her off? Whereabouts?" "Okay. And that was Saturday afternoon. And about what time was this? Did you drop her off for the day? Where did your van break down? What shop is that?" When Emily jumped out of the van, did she have her cell phone with her? "All right. Well, I will, if Emily tries to find out where she is, or if she's just trying to, ignore it, that's fine. But I'd like to at least figure that out. If you think there's anybody that I should try calling, just let me know." "Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you." As you heard on the call, Joseph's voice on the line was unnervingly calm, even indifferent for someone whose wife was missing. He told the officer that his van was at an auto shop in Virgins, a detail that raised no immediate alarms at the time, but would come back to bite him later. And that night, the police took swift action. They launched a search to find Emily Ferlazzo. Shortly after midnight, they located the couple's RV, and it wasn't at the auto shop, but in St. Albans, Vermont, parked in a residential area. This detail seemed to align more closely with the information Emily had shared with her mother about where they planned to stay. As officers searched the RV, everything seemed normal, until the search took a horrifying turn. In the bathroom, beneath the standing shower, they found 8 black garbage bags. Inside the bags were dismembered body parts, a bloody red pillow, and 2 spent bullets. And bag number 4 revealed the most gruesome discovery of all, Emily's head. One of the detectives who would testify about this later could be seen struggling to hold back tears and her emotions, as she confirmed they had found Emily's head in this bag. What else was located in bag number 4, if anything? Sorry, Emily's head. Okay. In looking at that, were you able to determine Emily's identity? Yes. And how were you able to determine that? I recognized Emily from photos. Okay. The RV was promptly seized and taken to the St. Albans police barracks for further investigation. Around the same time, police received a 911 call. A man named Spencer Lemons claimed to know Joseph Ferlazzo and reported that Joseph had confessed to killing his wife. The manhunt was on. By midday on Tuesday, Vermont State Police issued a statewide alert, naming Joseph Ferlazzo and the couple's dog Remington as missing. Joseph had been seen near St. Albans, roughly 55 miles northwest of Bolton, on property owned by one of his friends, close to where police had found the RV. But luck, or perhaps fate, intervened. A state police detective, stopping for lunch at a Maple Fields convenience store in St. Albans, recognized Joseph Ferlazzo. One of the officers, Trudeau, stated he just approached him and confirmed who he was and asked if he would be willing to come back. He was more than willing to come back. Joseph was escorted to the St. Albans barracks, where he confessed to the murder and dismemberment of his wife during interrogation. Before questioning, police photographed and booked Joseph. The photos revealed no visible wounds on his body, a detail that would later come under scrutiny. Another discovery would raise serious questions about his behavior later, because from Saturday morning at 1 a.m. until Monday, Joseph Ferlazzo had sent 16 text messages to Emily. The messages ranged from concerned to accusatory, as if he was pretending to search for her. In one he asked, "Where are you? When are you coming back?" But as time passed, the tone turned angry. The final message read, "You're an A. Now here we are. Where do you got out of it?" "Bolton Road." "Saturday evening?" "No, I'm trying to listen to the music. I was trying to put some candles on. You know, I'm smart. I'm throwing the candles around, telling people about being forceful and aggressive with me. It turned out that punching and kicking was a lot of hurtful things. I can't remember. What did you say? There was a lot of kicking and punching? Like, who was kicking and punching?" "I don't kick and punch. I've never heard. Like, I don't engage. So, I didn't want to be pushing back anymore." "Where was she punching you?" "In my arm. Kicking me in the groin. Like, just like body blows. And was this kind of the punching and kicking, was that occurring inside the van? I understand that you shot her, so it's quite now, that incident, continuing. I just know that I sat down and like something inside my head, just I remember. Feeling really warm. And I remember feeling blurry. Something inside me said, enough is enough." "What did you shoot her with?" "It was a Glock pistol." "Whose Glock is it?" "It's my Glock, sir." "Where is the Glock now?" "In the bus." "It's in the bus?" "Okay. Can you describe, Emily, when you shot her?" "She had stopped fighting, and we'd go on, and lay down, jumped on top of her, and I shot her in the head." "How many times?" "2. "What did you do next?" I cleaned up, and there was some blood coming out of her head, so I put a bag over her and walked out of the bathroom. Like a trash bag? Okay. Are those still in the bus? Okay. How did she get from the bed to the bathroom? Carried her. You carried her? Yes, sir. Was it obvious that she was deceased? Yes. Where in this bus is the firearm that you used, the Glock, and then it's in the bed. Are there any other firearms in there? What other guns are there? I don't know. Watch how he just can't help but smirk at the thought of having breakfast and coffee with his sister the day he murdered his wife. Did you talk about when it happened? No. Did they ask where she was when you went out to breakfast? Yes. What did he say? Still sleeping. Okay. Cool. All right. Bag 5 was her right arm and left foot. Bag 6 the remainder of the right leg. And bag 7 her torso. Bag 8 her left arm and right foot. Dr. Shapiro, the medical examiner, who conducted the autopsy, received the remains at the examiner's office. All 8 bags underwent radiographic imaging to assist in the examination. Bags 3 to 8 contained human body parts. The autopsy pointed at 2 fatal injuries, 2 gunshot wounds to the head with the entry wounds indicating a trajectory from left to right. The post-mortem injuries showed 18 stab wounds distributed as follows: 1 wound to the chest, 8 wounds to the abdomen, and 9 wounds to the back. Emily appeared to have been stabbed, and the toxicology results showed no significant substances detected apart from traces of nicotine, marijuana, and caffeine, which was consistent with Emily's habits, but no alcohol was found in her system. The cause of death was determined to be homicide by gunshot wounds to the head. During the investigation, police recovered bloody knives and a saw believed to have been used in the dismemberment. Emily's engagement ring, stained with a reddish-brown substance, was found in a cup holder inside the RV. Joseph Ferlazzo was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in 2023. While awaiting trial, a civil court awarded Emily's family $1.5 million in a wrongful death lawsuit. And although the family is unlikely to collect any of the monetary award, they successfully regained custody of the couple's dog Remington. Joseph Ferlazzo's murder trial began in December 2024 with the state presenting testimony from 15 witnesses. The defense called only one Joseph himself. My name is Spencer Lemons. I live in Sheldon, Vermont. I've lived there 10 years. He was a friend of mine. I knew him probably since 2017-ish, 16-ish. I heard from him when he communicated that he was going to be coming up to my house. How did he communicate with you? Via Facebook Messenger. Do you remember when he told you he was coming to your house? Late at night after 9 p.m. He said it would be around 11 to 20 at night. He was driving a red Jeep. He said, "Let's go pick up my van." He said it was at someone's house called the Langs. He said he wanted to get the van up to my house because that was the original plan, and he wanted to get it done now. I took my Honda Civic. What was Mr. Ferlazzo's demeanor like while you were driving in the car? He was quiet. I did ask him if there was anything going on, and he seemed a little distraught. I said I just want to get to the bus, and so I had him point the directions out to me as we went. About 30 minutes. We went in St. Albans. He gave me directions to where to go. We arrived at where his bus was parked, and I assume that's the Langs. I saw several patrol SUVs parked outside the residence. 3 or 4. Police vehicles. Alarm bells went off in my head, and he instructed me to drive past the police. That made me think something was not correct in the situation. Thus, it prompted me to continue to prod him for what's going on. I asked him, "What's going on, man? You need to tell me what's going on. If I'm going to be driving past police officers, I need to know what is going on." He responded to me with, "There's a lot going on. I wish I could see my grandmother." And then I said, "What is going on?" And he said, "Emily is back in the van." I said, "Is Emily alive?" He said, "No." And I asked, "Did you hurt her?" And he said, "Yes." And then he started getting fidgety in the car. He started going like this, moving around, reaching for the car door handle. I didn't know if he had anything on his person that would maybe cause harm to myself. So I immediately stopped the vehicle and told him to get out. What did you do when Joseph got out of the car? I immediately turned around towards my house to put distance between myself and him, so I could make a 911 call for the information he just gave me. Do you remember what time you made that call? It was probably close to midnight. Under oath, Joseph alleged that he acted in self-defense. He depicted Emily as an abusive partner, asserting that she frequently resorted to physical violence throughout their relationship. Joseph testified that Emily had physically assaulted him numerous times, citing incidents where she allegedly gave him black eyes and scratches. I left my device open for her to see who I was talking to. Your phone? My phone. Yes. And it led to violence. Explain what you mean by that. Physical abuse started coming into our relationship, where she would go through my phone and then respond by beating on me. Do you remember the first time that may have happened? Yes, I do. Tell me about that, please. Well, I put my phone on the charger, and she invited me to watch a season of whatever show that she was binging, so that we would sort of both be versed in the show, and we could sort of talk about it. So I said, yeah, I'll watch this show, and, we'll talk about it later. So she wandered off and took my phone, gave it an examination, and when she came back from the examination, I was still sitting in a chair in front of the television, and she walked up to me, and she threw my phone, and it hit me in the side of my face, and I turned to look at her, and she just started in with like a flurry of punches just hitting me in my head. Closed hand. Yeah, closed fist. What side of your head? Both fists? Yeah, she was on my right side. Yeah, both fists. Yeah. What did you do? I was shocked. It was the first time that I've ever seen that side of her, so. And then the punches started coming in, so I just naturally defended myself. I blocked the punches, and I sort of find my way out of the chair, and she wasn't stopping, so I had to physically catch her arms, and I had to hold her arms by her sides until she sort of ran out of steam, just restraining her. Was she saying anything to you while this was happening? Yeah, she was really angry, so, you're a fucking asshole. I don't want to, do I have to swear? Do I have to quote? I want you to say what she said. Yeah, okay. Yeah, she would say, you're a fucking asshole. I can't believe you're still fucking talking to this bitch. You told me you were going to stop talking to her, and it was a friend of mine that I had known for years, and I told her that I would stop being physical with this friend, and that our relationship wasn't going to dissolve because we were friends since 2014, just with respect to the monogamy that Emily had requested, I stopped being physical with her. Was she angry? Yes, she was. Yes, she was very angry. Yes, she was assaulting me. So she was verbally angry, yes. And physically, yes, ma'am. Hitting you? Yes, physically. And did you ever hit her back? No, ma'am. So you took her by the arms, yes. And did she calm down? Yeah. Yes. After a bit of time, she had calmed down, and, I opened up communication to tell her that I wasn't continuing a sexual relationship with Victoria, like I had previously said. It was strictly friendship, only platonic. There was no reason for her to be upset. Her and I were very physical. We were always together. Emily and I there was no issues where I wanted to at that moment, at that time, I didn't want to be with anybody else. Did you ever talk to her at this time, at this instance, about the fact that she had thrown your phone at you and hit you? Did you ever talk about that? Oh, actually, yes. Yes, I said that I did. I said that, it's not okay. I don't hit you, so please don't hit me. I grew up in a household where hitting happened, and I don't want to continue that. And her and I had talked about bringing children into our relationship, so I thought that domestic abuse definitely needed to be cut out of the equation. What did she say? Well, she had apologized after some time for her harsh reaction. We had gotten together and sort of made up physically, emotionally. We got to a place where it didn't happen again for some time. How long is some time? It was probably a good month, or maybe even a month and a half. Approximately when did this incident happen? I want to say somewhere it was fall of 2020. Could have been September, October. So fall of 2020. Yeah, fall. First time that right. Joseph painted a picture of Emily as a controlling and verbally abusive person. There was more incidents from that point moving forward. Maybe late October or early November. If I'm thinking on the calendar. Hard to say exactly. But there was another instance where I recall I was sitting on the bed in our bedroom. I was sending a text message. I think it was an Instagram message, but I was messaging a client. I was interested in more than a professional relationship with. Emily came in, and she saw I was sending like a GIF or GIF however people say it differently. Yeah, like a short video clip when Emily came into the room. She had her laptop computer. She saw what I was doing, and she assaulted me with her laptop. She jumped on the bed and struck me in the head like she hit me. She had the laptop, and she hit me with it. Where? In my head. What part of your head? The back of my head on the right side, I guess. Did she say anything? Yeah, she said things like you're a piece of shit. Did she do anything else physical other than hit you in the back of the head with her laptop? She tried to. I scurried off the side of the bed, and I just sort of like ran around the perimeter of the bed to stay away from her. And I was saying, things like calm down, like let's just talk it out. Like when she hit you in the head with her laptop, did it hurt? Yes, it hurt. Was there any blood? No, there was no bleeding. Did it leave like a lump in your head? Yeah, there was like a lump, like a goose egg. Did you seek medical attention? No, I didn't seek any medical attention. Okay. She actually didn't want to talk about it further. She just wanted to get some food. She wanted to go to like McDonald's and get some food and then watch some Netflix. So it just ended? Yeah. The next month there was an incident where I was tattooing a woman and Emily was listening and watching on the Ring camera. When the client left, Emily had come into the room and like flipped the table onto its side. She like knocks everything onto the ground, comes over and starts slapping me. Open palm. Yeah, she had an open palm. She slapped my face. I had unplugged the Ring camera. I was done being watched, scrutinized for my conversation with my friends. I unplugged the camera and Emily did not like it. She came in and assaulted me. Well, you've described her hitting you with an on your face. Yes, with an open palm. That's right. Did she hit you in any other way? I think there was like some, she like pounded on me with like a closed fist like on my chest. You are much bigger than Emily, aren't you? I'm 6 foot, probably about 200 pounds. And she was much smaller than you. She's 5'3", about 130 pounds. Explain to us how a woman who's that much smaller than you can actually inflict pain. I think my nervous system is working pretty well because if someone hits me I feel it in and I have a pain response. She hit hard. She wasn't a gentle person. I wouldn't describe her as gentle. Like I said, we were talking a lot about introducing a child, and I thought if you're going to hit me, you're going to hit the child. I'd seen her kick my dog on occasion, and I was like, I was in love with her, and I wanted to move forward with our relationship and have a baby, and I was scared for the baby. What did you do after she started hitting you and gave you a black eye? I had to grab her by the arms. I remember this incident. She felt, I don't know exactly how to describe it. It felt like she started doing steroids or something. She had so much strength that I had to hold her so tightly that I almost thought that I couldn't even hold her. She was sweating and flailing and cursing, and it was an event. I told her that I was concerned for my own physical health, because she would tell me graphic details about how she felt after intercourse with said individual. I told her, I said I don't want to get whatever he has. I'm an independent person. I'm a very private person. I don't want to dump my crap on other people. According to Joseph, the fatal altercation occurred after a heated argument. He alleged that Emily had been drinking and smoking, behaviors that escalated her aggression. He claimed she kicked their dog and then turned her anger towards him. Joseph described himself as a punching bag. She was coming at him with a gun, and he shot her in self-defense. Now remember the autopsy findings? They revealed no traces of alcohol in Emily's system. This undermined Joseph's account that she was drinking before they had a fight. Joseph and Emily had met through a mutual friend, Lauren, during a piercing apprenticeship that Joseph was conducting. At the time, Joseph identified as polyamorous, openly seeking multiple romantic and sexual relationships. Emily, however, insisted on monogamy, especially as the relationship progressed towards marriage. Joseph claimed that when they got married, they agreed on a poly clause stipulating a temporary period of monogamy before he could revert to his preferred lifestyle. No written evidence of this agreement has ever surfaced. Joseph recounted several moments of alleged abuse which he used to justify his actions on the day of the crime. However, inconsistencies in his testimony and forensic evidence would challenge his narrative as the trial unfolded. Joseph portrayed himself as the ultimate victim who had reached a breaking point. However, Emily's mother provided a starkly different narrative stating that her daughter was often seen with bruises on her body. These injuries, according to Emily's mother, resulted from arguments over Joseph's infidelity or his self-described polyamorous ways. Emily's mother also mentioned that Emily often considered leaving the marriage due to these issues. Key evidence contradicting Joseph's claims. Photographs taken from the police on the day of Joseph's interrogation showed no marks or bruises on his body, raising questions about his claims of being physically abused throughout the marriage. Furthermore, reports indicated that Emily had visible injuries consistent with domestic abuse, not Joseph. Crying in the courtroom. Observers noticed that Joseph appeared to be crying during his testimony. In one instance, he described the killing as terrible and claimed, "I'm very emotional right now." So what really happened that night? Well, according to the state prosecutors on October 15, 2021, the evidence presented a very different story. This is what they believed happened. Joseph and Emily arrived in Vermont at the Bear Run condos at 7:20 p.m. They parked at the condo complex and met with Nicole for about 15 minutes inside the van, planning to catch up, watching Netflix, and hanging out at the Airbnb. An argument erupted between Joseph and Emily. Joseph brought Emily to the same condo complex where his ex-wife lived, coinciding with their one-year wedding anniversary. Tensions escalated when Emily expressed frustration over Joseph's lack of monogamy. She told him she was done, that she no longer wanted to be with him and intended to leave. At 12:01 a.m., Joseph turned off his phone. Emily lay down in bed while Joseph sat on the couch, stewing over their argument. He spent 5 to 10 minutes planning his next move. By this time, Joseph decided Emily could not leave him. He retrieved his Glock 19 with a silencer from the closet and approached the bed where Emily was lying with her head on the pillow, scrolling on her phone. Joseph used a throw pillow to muffle the sound and fired 2 shots into the left side of Emily's head, killing her instantly. The evidence contradicted Joseph's claim that Emily had a gun. Both pistols recovered from the scene belonged to him, and forensic evidence showed Emily was lying down when she was killed. After the murder, Joseph turned off Emily's phone and placed a market basket shopping bag over her head, securing it with a garbage bag likely to collect her draining blood. He then moved her body to the shower and cleaned up the crime scene. Joseph replaced the bed linens, disposed of the bloody items in garbage bags, and turned his phone back on at 1:35 a.m. Despite the murder, he continued with routine activities, texting his sister about breakfast plans and recommending a restaurant. Joseph and his sister went to Maxie's for breakfast, where he claimed Emily was still sleeping. Later, he drove the van to St. Albans, parked at his friend's property, and fabricated a story about Emily leaving him. He spent the day tattooing his sister and sent Emily's phone a message. "Whatever, I'm going to spend time with Nikki while I can. Call me." Over the following days, Joseph dined out, went shopping, and socialized as if nothing had happened. He dismembered Emily's body using a serrated saw, placing the remains in garbage bags. On Monday morning, before leaving for New Hampshire to retrieve his Jeep, he sent Emily's phone one final message. "You're an asshole. I don't deserve this shit." This was not the first violent death associated with Joseph Ferlazzo Jr.'s family. In 2009, his stepmother, young Helene Ferlazzo, was stabbed to death in her Pennsylvania home. Although Joseph Ferlazzo Sr. was questioned by the police, the case remains open. Joseph Ferlazzo Sr. owned a massage parlor in Reading, Pennsylvania, which was raided in May 2009. Police arrested multiple women on charges of prostitution, including a relative of young Helene Ferlazzo. On the night of the murder, Joseph Sr. claimed to have returned home from grocery shopping and discovered his wife's body. Verdict. On December 13, 2024, after less than 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found Joseph Ferlazzo guilty of first-degree murder for shooting his wife and dismembering her body during their one-year wedding anniversary trip on October 2021. In conclusion, while Joseph Ferlazzo's verdict has been released, his sentence is still pending. Case 6. On the other end of this 911 call is 27-year-old Nicholas Furcus. He's frantically calling in to report an attempted home invasion gone horribly wrong. This wasn't the first call the dispatchers received from the address. Heidi cannot be heard again on the call, and there's no contact with the dispatchers until her husband calls back 65 seconds later. Dispatchers managed to keep the frantic Nick on call with them until 7 minutes later, when police arrived. When police arrived, they noticed the front door was open just an inch, and the scent of gunpowder was thick in the air. As they enter the house, the first thing they see is a shotgun on the floor, and then in the kitchen, they see Nick with a woman lying next to him. One of the officers checks the house for intruders, while the other attends to Nick and Heidi. When paramedics arrived, they immediately provided care. Nick had been shot in the leg and was rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately, Heidi didn't make it. In the hospital, Nick was being treated for a through-and-through gunshot wound to his upper left thigh, and while there was no major bleeding, there was soft tissue damage. At times, he was hysterical, crying loudly. After a few hours of treatment, he was released. Heidi and Nick met at church when she was a freshman in high school, and he was a junior. They got married in 2005 and bought a house in September 2007. He worked for his family business, and Heidi worked as a clerk at a financial services company. Nick Furcus had a very warm and engaging personality, carried himself with confidence, and had high character, high integrity in the church. That was the reputation he built for himself. Both Heidi and Nick were highly regarded in the community. She brought it outside the family, too, and school and church and friendships. She brought a lot of joy everywhere she went. To be interacting with her, you felt heard and seen. Her heart's most behind wanting to convey how exceptional of a person that she was. I'm not kidding. She was amazing. As Nick remains in the hospital, police are already investigating the scene and asking around to figure out who this intruder might be. And that's when they came across the neighbor who lived right next door. I was woken up by the kittens kind of walking around. Some noise caught my attention, so I stuck my head out the window, kind of listened. That's when I ended up hearing what sounded like gunshots. Kind of this agonizing yell of, "You shot her, you shot me. Please, please," no, something along those lines. And then it was done. Less than 4 hours after the horrific events of that morning, Nick is discharged from hospital and brought in for questioning. While Nick didn't give a straight yes or no answer, he did agree to, confirming that the door was closed, but he forgot to bolt it from the inside. Nick then describes what happened that early Sunday morning. But then I started feeling with our doorknob. Hearing the rattle of the front door handle, Nick wakes up Heidi and urgently tells her that someone is trying to break in. Nick grabs his double-barrel shotgun with his left hand and his jeans with his right. Together, he and Heidi head down the stairs to grab her wallet, which is sitting on the console table. As soon as she grabs it, the door opens. Try to shut the door shut, but it gets forced open. And the guy that was there, I think he saw it, and I think he grabbed the barrel. Remember, Heidi was on the phone with 911 at that moment. As the intruder grabbed a hold of Nick's barrel, Nick realized he had lost control of the situation. I'm handling the trigger. He pushes it up against my chest, which I'm pretty parallel to the console table. And I don't remember exactly what happened, but the gun went off. So my fingers slipped out of the trigger. And that's the fatal shot that killed Heidi. So you're in the foyer area. So the stairs are right by the door. Stairs are behind me. Heidi's going that way. Towards the kitchen. Guns here, chest high, pretty parallel to the ground. Okay, so if I'm the bad guy coming through the door, you'd be standing right here. And then the gun goes off. And it goes off down. Yeah, I know I hit Heidi. I know I hit her. Something just seemed really odd. Especially the way he said, "I know I did." As if it was something casual. I know I hit her. I don't know what I hit her, but I know I hit her. Did it hit her in the chest, the back? She was running away, so I definitely hit her in the back. Her back, or the back of her head. I don't know. It wasn't low. I don't think it was a high shot. Did she yell or anything? Yeah, and she went straight down. 1794, Minnehaha Avenue. Minnehaha, someone's trying what? Take your time, it's okay. You want some Kleenex? This is the first time Nick showed emotion during the interview. He's clearly overwhelmed. But was he feeling bad for Heidi, or needed some time for himself? It's likely at this point that the detective started to have his doubts. So you and this guy are still in the foyer? Yeah, I get it. Well, you pointed at him. No, it was like straight up and over like that. Okay, so you're like going. It's all down. Oh, so the barrel's down? I grabbed on my right and pulled. Okay, like that, and that's when it went out the second time. So where did it hit you? In the leg, the left leg? It hit me in the left leg. Now where, if you want to point to my leg, you can just... Well, it's right, my wound is right here. Okay, so right there? Yeah. Shoot yourself then? I don't know if it was me myself, or if it was the guy. I honestly don't remember at that time, because his hand was right above the trigger. He could have pulled it, or I could have pulled it. I don't remember. What happens next, then? He's gone. He takes off 100. I fall down. He's gone. I fell. I got to Heidi, and I had to redial 911. His face down, and then I rolled it over, and I was getting... Okay, because he visited the crime scene that morning, and there were many questions which didn't seem to add up. There was a vase, some receipts, a beer bottle, and none of that was knocked over. There was a pair of jeans laying in the foyer area, and then the shotgun was laying there on the ground as well, right inside the doorway. Regardless, the next step was to get an accurate description of the intruder. What did this guy look like? Was he a white guy, a black guy, an evening guy? I think he was a black guy, with a dark hooded sweatshirt that was drawn up pretty tight. But I did not get a good look, because I was looking for Heidi and trying to wrestle the gun away. We'll just say this is... Yeah, this is the gun. Where are you grabbing? I'm, here. And if I'm the guy, where's my hand? Up at the top. Where's his other hand then? I think on the door. But he was really big. 6 feet 1 inch, 6 feet 2 inches. So he was that big. He was probably that big, yeah. So how much do you think he weighed? 200 pounds. Now, remember Nick says he couldn't get a good look at this intruder? But despite this, he believes it to be a black man, 6 feet 1 inch, wearing a dark hoodie and weighing 200 pounds. But all this still doesn't explain, why were they running to the garage in the first place? If Nick had a gun, why not stay behind? So what would have prevented you from just sitting at the top of the stairs with the shotgun waiting for them to come upstairs then? Well, the last time the police came about a year and a half ago, Heidi and we had a conversation about what do we do if something like that happens again. You know, in that case it was the police, but what do we... And that's just the plan that we came up with, is to go to the garage, is to just get in the car and leave. Because we knew we could get out of the house and into the garage quickly. If I was in my house, in my bedroom, and someone was breaking into my place, and she's calling, and I'm the woman, I'm waiting at the top of the stairs and saying, hey, if you come upstairs, I'm justified in killing you if you come breaking into my house. The compassionate person it needs, not all the trigger, that's the hard part about it for me. The irony, of course, is that this compassionate plan led to his wife losing her life and Nick himself getting injured. You know, I'm looking, I didn't see anybody come out of that house. Do you have an alarm system there at the house? I think we only bought the house that had an alarm system, but it hasn't been activated since we owned it. So we don't pay anything to maintain an alarm system. But even if they didn't want to pay for a professional alarm service, the alarm could still make a sound to alert them of intruders. So why not just use it if they were so worried about break-ins that they actually made a plan to run away? If they're not in the house yet. If they're in the house, then our plan is, we'll stay upstairs. Now if this whole thing took place, and you called 911 again, so when the cops come in, I'm the right guy. And are you cradling her or standing over her? I was holding her. I didn't want to leave her. When the ambulance came, they took you. They took me. All right. And I kept asking. I still don't. I'm assuming that we're a society, but I still don't. Nobody gave me any answers on what was going on with her. But this is the strangest part about the interview, because it's an hour and a half in, and only now Nick is asking about Heidi. And even then, he's not really pushing for it. He's being quite passive and saying no one's telling him anything, and he's assuming the worst. This isn't the type of behavior I would expect from a husband who doesn't know the condition of his wife, as he was taken away by ambulance while she stayed behind. He doesn't even know if she's dead or alive yet. By saying that he just assumes the worst, it seems to be an extremely nonchalant way for any husband to be dealing with potentially gut-wrenching loss. But the biggest kicker of the entire interview is that they were losing their house tomorrow. So they planned to pack, move out, inform their folks, and find a place to stay, all in the same day. And these aren't backpackers or people living in a tent, but 2 adults with a full house with nowhere to go. Well, that's kind of close notice. It is, and I think the reason is because we're both kind of dealing with the shape of the whole thing. Because we're embarrassed that we haven't been able to be honest with our friends about our struggles. Both of us are too stubborn to admit that we're failing. What a coincidence that Heidi gets murdered by an intruder the day before they get locked out of their house. And no one knew about the couple's financial struggles. Not friends, not family. But the question is, was even Heidi aware of this? After the awkward but important questions about their personal life to determine if there was a motive, the detective shifted focus back to the crime scene to one area which didn't quite make sense. Specifically, where and how exactly Nick was shot. After 3 hours of questioning and a lot of colorful explanations, the detective still didn't have anything concrete to charge Nick by. Besides, he'd answered every single question he asked him. After the detective gave him his card and left the room, it was finally over for Nick, and he could breathe a sigh of relief. Then his family entered the room, and he hugged his mom and cried for 10 minutes straight. While Nick got to go home, there were still lingering questions about this mysterious intruder, and the detective thought he was interviewing a victim, but near the end he had his doubts. When the autopsy came back, as expected, it revealed that Heidi died from a single shotgun blast to the back. The pellets tore through her ribs, spine, and punctured a lung. Poor Heidi had no chance. Her family were surprised to learn of the foreclosure, and they insisted that Heidi was the type of person that would have told them if she had known. Nick lawyered up the same day, and when police requested him to come down to help build a sketch of the intruder, he refused at the advice of his own lawyers. But instead, nearly 3 weeks later, they submitted their own sketch from their own hired sketch artist. This sketch was released to the public, but it yielded no leads. Time went by. Days turned into weeks, into months, and eventually years. And 2 years later, it seemed like Nick had moved on. He married Rachel Sanchez in August 2012. The couple went on to have 3 children, and even moved into a house bought to them by Nick's parents. But Heidi's family never forgot. How could they? They kept calling up the detective at special occasions, such as the day Heidi died and the day she was born, and just dwell on the reality of what I just heard. But what surprised everyone is that Nick, the good-hearted Christian man, refused to cooperate. In fact, he told the detectives to stop bothering him. That's a little bit more abnormal than what we typically deal with. Fortunately for Heidi's family, the detectives never gave up on the case. And when it seemingly went cold 5 years later, police got a breakthrough. A tipster called in saying that they recognized the person on the sketch. It was a man, Michael Pye. Bingo. Could this be the elusive intruder they had all been searching for? Could Nick have been telling the truth, but received unwanted suspicion? The resemblance to the sketch was remarkable. This could be their man. But just a tiny snag. Michael Pye was in prison at the time of Heidi's murder. He could not possibly be the one who murdered Heidi. Then how was his resemblance so well captured in the sketch? Well, it turns out Michael Pye had been shown on newspapers before. And it's likely that Nick Firkus had seen his face on these newspapers and simply gone and presented this to the sketch artist or built it from memory. Suddenly, all suspicions came back to Nick. And in 2019, Sergeant Nicole Seeps of the St. Paul's Police Department took a fresh look at the death of Heidi Firkus. The story never made sense to me. He tells investigators that he grabbed a shotgun and then proceeded to have Heidi go down the stairs in front of him. Why he would send the unarmed person down in front of you? In the 5 years, Nick had not once contacted Heidi's family since her death. So Sergeant Nicole Seeps enlisted the help of the FBI to help reconstruct the sound data from Heidi's final call. And from their analysis, there's no evidence of a third person in the house. You can't hear the door open. You can't hear a struggle. You can't hear anything except a shot and Heidi falling down. Turning to forensics, DNA swabs taken from the gun showed no unknown genetic material from anyone else. The only material they could find was Nick's. This was the same at the doorknob, so either the intruder was wearing gloves or wasn't there at all. Furthermore, examining the shot that struck Heidi showed inconsistencies in the account that Nick described. By Nick's account, the gun would have accidentally gone off much closer to the front door and near the table. But Heidi was shot much closer, from the middle of the foyer and at shoulder height. And a struggle at the entrance would have made contact with the table, yet nothing on the table was disturbed or knocked over. It's likely Heidi was kept in the dark about the foreclosure and eviction the next day. Heidi seemed to have no knowledge about the foreclosure and eviction. She hadn't even taken time off the next day, a Monday. Nick was handling all communications about the foreclosure. He likely provided her false assurances and was actively concealing the severity of the financial situation. When the eviction processes began on February 12, 2010, Nicholas attended the hearings himself on March 8. The law firm who handled the foreclosure and eviction only made contact with Nicholas. He's also the only one to sign the documents. Wherever investigators looked, there was no knowledge that Heidi was aware they were being evicted. It's likely that Nick had lied to Heidi and strung her along all this time. He told her that he was handling the creditor calls and financial issues. He told her there was an audit involving fraud on their bank account and their credit scores weren't that bad. But investigators found no such evidence of an audit or fraud, and there seemed to be no indication they were planning to move. In fact, Heidi had made plans that day, including a pedicure in church. She was also scheduled to work the next day, without taking any time off. Heidi's reliance on Nick to handle all financial matters, combined with his proven lies and deceptive assurances, likely prevented her from discovering the truth about their situation. Of course, Sergeant Steeps found it very odd that Heidi was murdered the day before her eviction. And then she learned that Nick Firkus was recently divorced from his second wife. So she decided to reach out to Rachel, and Rachel shared her suspicions. She recalls finding a notice in their home that stated they were delinquent on their property taxes and that their house was in danger of being foreclosed on. That's when she realized all those rumors about Heidi and Nick might be true. Just started to look around. I started to get bad feelings, like gut feelings that I didn't want to assume anything. Like the little lies, brought me to Heidi every once in a while. But I was like, that's too big. Like, don't go there. And then this letter kind of tipped me over. I'm just like, oh boy, now this is bigger than I thought it was. Rachel decided to confront Nick and record the conversation. Your actions have caused me to just distrust you completely. And the fact that your lying was so easy for you to do in front of me over and over makes me think that I could murder my wife. That you could lie about something. That I could murder my wife. Yes. Search warrant. He's coming, nothing on his hands. Hello? Police. We got a search warrant. Okay. Nick, come on out. Yes. Go put your hands behind your back for me. Okay. Please, I'm sure everything like this is all about me. Do you have a warrant for your arrest, sir? What? Homicide. In May 2021, 11 years after the murder of Heidi, Nick Fergus was arrested and charged with second-degree murder in the death of his wife. A grand jury would later upgrade this charge to first-degree murder. The prosecution argued that the motive for Nick was to hide the severe financial hardship and shame from his own wife. He would rather kill her than for her to know the truth about their impending eviction and the many lies he had told her throughout the years. But Nick's defense attorney, Robert Richmond, denied these claims. There was nothing about murdering the woman, who everyone agreed he loved, that would help his situation, saying that after the murder, Nick was still evicted and his financial status were exposed for the world to see. But the prosecution presented strong evidence, including the fact that only Nick's DNA was found in the gun used in the shooting. You don't always leave DNA, and especially when your hands are covered. Nick presumably shot Heidi, which we could hear in the call. And then he shot himself in the leg and called 911. That all happened within 65 seconds. I believe that Heidi came down the stairs alone on her cell phone. You can hear her on the 911 call. She's breathing heavy. She's moving. You can tell. And that Nick is most likely here in the living room. There's a wall actually here with a doorway. And that as she passes him, he steps out behind her and shoots her. There were also 2 prior misdials before Nick reached 911. The question is, was it Heidi reaching out for justice one final time? Or were they purposely made by Nick in a frantic state? And could there have been an intruder? The evidence presented was largely circumstantial, but witnesses testified there were no signs of break-in, contradicting Nick's story of an intruder. The defense argued that the lack of DNA was because the intruder wore gloves, and with only a few seconds in the house, there wasn't much time to spread this DNA. The struggle was as you come into the door to the right of there, as is shown by the spread of the bullets into the door. Look, for cops came bursting through that door into the house because of the emergency, and the stuff was still there. But this explanation was not convincing for the jury, because on February 10th, after only 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Nicholas Fergus guilty of murder without a shadow of a doubt. Sentence you must give. I do maintain, and will maintain to my dying breath, my innocence of this crime. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But do you think Nick is an innocent man or guilty as charged? Let me know in the comments. Case 7. It's 1972, and police are frustrated as a killer is murdering female college students and completely evading their detection. Meanwhile, one man, who would normally stand out in a crowd of thousands, is flying under the radar, completely undetected. At 6 feet 9 inches and 285 pounds, Ed Kemper is impossible to miss. But he's been befriending off-duty police officers at a bar near the courthouse, getting as much inside information on the case as he can. With his near-genius level IQ, he is gaming the entire trade. They'd buy me a beer, I'd buy them a beer. Casual relationships, but I was poking around a little bit trying to find some things out. I knew they wouldn't be privy to hot information, but there were some things that were bothering me, like were there any speculations on how they were dying? How did you get the knowledge to outsmart the police? Watching television, believe it or not. Joseph Wambaugh, Police Story. Got some tremendous insights into not just the gimmicks, the actual things, the tidbits that you would pick up from their procedures, but the mechanics behind that, the logic behind it, was I would not allow myself to walk into even a potential trap of behavior. And one of those was talking about those crimes too much to people, initiating conversations about that. There was a memorial service for 2 of the victims. Yes. Were you tempted to go? Yes. But I'd seen one too many episodes of one too many crime shows where that is one of the available resources for clues. With an IQ at a near-genius level, serial killer Ed Kemper was able to outsmart police and, tragically, his victims at every single turn. His unassuming personality, would be so enchanting that even a call into police to confess his murders would lead to them sending him away in disbelief. Santa Cruz, California was traditionally a quiet beach town complete with surfers and retirees, at least until 1965, the year the University of Santa Cruz was built. With residents suddenly spilling over from relatively nearby San Francisco, the college turned the town from a peaceful, quiet retirement community into more of a bustling, youthful, loose, and free-spirited city similar to its hippie Berkeley, California counterpart. So all was fine in the city until 1972. Suddenly, girls began to go missing and body parts began to wash ashore. Someone was killing young female or co-ed hitchhikers, and the community wondered whether the fairly recent change in its residential makeup was to blame. The media quickly dubbed the elusive killer the co-ed butcher. On December 18, 1948, Edmund Emil Kemper was born in Burbank, California to two very disciplinarian parents, Cornell Kemper and Edmund Kemper II. He was the only son and the middle child. While Kemper looked up to his father, he resented his harshly punitive and verbally abusive mother. His parents would divorce when the younger Ed was 9 years old, after which, Cornell moved away with Ed and his two sisters. At an early age, Kemper began showing classic signs of serial killer pathology, including torturing insects and animals and performing rituals with his sister's dolls, which resulted in severing their heads and hands. He remembered how, as a small boy, he used to slip out of his house, go to his second-grade teacher's house, and armed with his father's bayonet, observe her through the windows. In later interviews, he admitted that gas chamber and electric chair were some of his favorite games when he was a child. At age 10, Kemper buried a pet cat alive, dug it up, severed its head, and placed it on a spike. Kemper admitted in a later interview that he enjoyed lying to his family about murdering the cat. Then a few years later, when he was 13, he murdered another family cat because he thought it favored his sister over him. He preserved separated parts of the cat's remains in his closet until his mother discovered them. On one occasion, when Kemper's older sister teased him about why he would not try to kiss his teacher, he responded, "If I kiss her, I have to kill her first." As the years passed, Kemper grew bigger and stronger, which was not surprising given that his mother was 6 feet and his father 6 feet 8. But Kemper's bizarre behavior also grew and became more concerning. As a result, his mother used to lock him in the basement for the night out of fear that he might sexually abuse his sisters. Kemper was locked underground in complete darkness, with the trapdoor on the floor covered by the kitchen table to ensure he could not escape. Kemper was terrified and traumatized, and it was those nights in the darkness where he allowed his hatred of women to fester and grow. When Kemper was 14, he ran away from home to reconcile with his father. There he learned that his father had remarried and had a stepson. Kemper stayed with his father for a short while, but within a few months his father sent him away to live with his paternal grandparents in North Fork, California. Kemper was devastated. He hated living in North Fork. He described his grandfather as senile, and said that his grandmother constantly emasculated his grandfather and himself. At age 15, after he had been living with his grandparents for 10 months, Kemper and his grandmother, Maud Kemper, were arguing at the kitchen table. Kemper was furious and raced off to recover a hunting weapon that had been taken away from him because he was shooting animals pointlessly. He returned to the kitchen and shot and killed his grandmother. Then, when his grandfather returned from shopping for groceries, Kemper went outside and shot him in the driveway next to his car, killing him. Not knowing what to do next, he called his mother, who told him to contact the local police and turn himself in. After being apprehended, Kemper simply said that he wanted to experience what it felt like to kill Grandma, the most common quote associated with Kemper. Kemper later testified that he killed his grandfather to prevent him from suffering once he found out his wife was dead. Following the murders, court psychiatrists briefly diagnosed Kemper with paranoid schizophrenia. As a result, he was committed to a Atascadero State Hospital, an all-male maximum security facility that houses mentally ill convicts. With a population of over 1,600 patients, several dozen who had committed murder, and 800 mentally disordered sex offenders, it was more than the 10-person team of psychiatrists could handle. And ultimately, and tragically, the institutionalization of Kemper at the facility ended up exposing him to extreme deviant behavior and making him far more dangerous than he was before he was there. He would later recall, "I found myself, a minor, in a psychiatric hospital for hardened criminals. According to the law, I should have been sent to an institution with minimal security. But the judge was so outraged by my crimes that he declared, "I'm not wanting to send this young man to Disneyland." That's why I ended up in a Atascadero with people on average 20 years older than me. Believe me, I grew up very quickly. And Kemper would do more than just grow up at a Atascadero. He was extremely smart and bright. His IQ clocked in at a mere genius level, somewhere between 136 and 145, both of which rank in the top 2% of scoring. And he was also incredibly friendly and extremely likable. All of these aspects resulted in him becoming a trusted assistant to the psychology staff with access to the detailed files of murderers and sex offenders, including detailed accounts of how they carried out their crimes and the tactics they used to get away with them. In his role, the then 15-year-old Kemper would hear firsthand highly graphic details of violent rapists, and he began to have his own violent sexual fantasies. And he also noted how most of the rapists had been caught because they were identified by their victims. So he concluded that his best chance at being successful as an assailant was to make sure he didn't leave any victims alive. Also, since he had access to psychological tests, he knew exactly what psychologists were looking for when they diagnosed patients. So he learned how to pass any tests at will. He had actually memorized the exact responses to 28 separate assessments. So while Kemper was originally diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia upon admission, psychiatrists and social workers at Atascadero re-diagnosed him with a personality trait disturbance. Then, after 5 years at Atascadero, the now gigantic 6'9", 285-pound Kemper was granted parole and released from the psychiatric facility on December 18, 1969, which was his 21st birthday. He was released to a halfway house along with a recommendation from the hospital that Kemper not be allowed to return to his mother as it could trigger more violence. But once he was released, there was little to no oversight or management. And without any means of support or assistance, Kemper returned to live with his mother. Once he was staying with his mother again, Kemper's relationship with her became even toxic than before. The two often had arguments, which the neighbors usually overheard. Kemper later said, Kemper relocated to Alameda to live with a friend after getting a job at the Division of Highways and accumulating enough cash. But that only gave him little relief from his mother, who still frequently called and visited unannounced. And since he often struggled with money, Kemper would end up having to return to his mother's apartment frequently. Kemper would also be involved in 2 motorcycle accidents, one of which rendered his left arm broken, for which he'd receive a $15,000 settlement and use it to purchase a yellow Ford Galaxy. And with that car, he began to practice. Back in the early 70s, hitchhiking was not uncommon among college students on the West Coast, and Kemper would pick up numerous young female hitchhikers over and over again as he fantasized what he could do to them and fine-tuned his strategies. He'd deliver each of them safely to their destination, noting which of his actions was the most effective for gaining the women's trust. Kemper would later discuss these practice runs, sharing that it all started because of his inability to communicate with women. My inability to communicate socially, sexually, I wasn't impotent, but emotionally I was impotent. I was scared to death of failing in male-female relationships. I knew absolutely nothing about that whole area, even if just sitting down and talking with the young lady. I need to be able to really communicate, and ironically enough, that's why I began picking people up. He performed these practice runs for more than a year, fine-tuning his strategy, until May 1972. The early 1970s in Santa Cruz was already a terrifying time for residents. John Lindley Frazier, a Charles Manson-like murderer who killed a Santa Cruz family of 5, had just recently been convicted and sentenced. And another serial killer, Herbert Mullen, was about to begin terrorizing the city just months after Kemper would begin his killings. So between the 3 of them, the small California town was about to begin a streak of killings that would help it earn the title of murder capital of the world. On May 7, 1972, Ed Kemper would put his long-awaited plans into action, picking up Mary and Pesci and Anita Mary LaCasa, 2 18-year-old Fresno State University students who were hitchhiking. He was supposed to be driving them from Berkeley to Stanford University, but after an hour's drive he arrived at a remote woodland location close to Alameda that he was familiar with. There, he killed Pesci, then LaCasa. Kemper then put both women's bodies in his Ford Galaxy's trunk and began driving back to his apartment. And he was nearly caught when he was stopped on his way by a police officer for having a broken taillight. Kemper remained calm and polite and was just issued a warning, but he would later confess that the stop excited him, And had the police officer decided to check Kemper's trunk, Kemper said he would have instantly killed him. Pesci's skull would later be discovered on Loma Prieta mountain in August of that year. Despite a thorough search, no more of Pesci's remains nor any signs of Lucchesa were ever found. Kemper would later comment on how his first murder was bumbling and how he should have been caught. I thought I was pretty slick, and when I tripped all over myself that first 2 murders, the first 24 hours, there were 3 clear times I should have been busted and I wasn't. Because 3 different individuals or 3 different groups of people got scared and minded their own business and looked the other way. Kemper's next victim was Aiko Ku, a 15-year-old dance student who was hitchhiking to a dance class after she missed her bus. Kemper would pick her up and strangle her. The day after Kemper murdered Ku, he was due before a panel of psychiatrists for follow-up parole requirement. Kemper told them what he knew they wanted to hear, and the 2 doctors on the panel concluded that there was no reason to consider Kemper a threat to anyone. They congratulated each other on having rehabilitated a killer child, and both of them recommended that Kemper's juvenile record be expunged to give him a better shot at becoming a better citizen. The judge disagreed with sealing Kemper's record, but didn't have any grounds to fight it. Kemper delighted in both the secret charade, as well as his ability to pull off such a feat, just 1 day after murdering Ku. He drove away with a clean bill of health and a criminal record wiped clean. Kemper would lay low for a while, reveling in and fantasizing about his past murders. He continued picking up hitchhikers, releasing them, and learning. But as the fighting with his mother continued and escalated, their strong urge to kill returned. And on January 7, 1973, Kemper, now living with his mother again, picked up 18-year-old student Cindy Shaw while driving around the Cabrillo College campus. He would shoot and kill her. By this point, police had connected the co-ed killings to each other. As a result, they increased the bus schedule and strongly warned the students against hitchhiking. Also, students had been warned to only accept rides from cars with university stickers. But since Kemper's mother worked at the college, he was able to get such a sticker himself. Then, 1 month later, February 5th, Kemper had another argument with his mother, after which he stormed out of his house in search of possible victims. On campus, he came across students Allison Liu, 20 years old, and Rosalind Thorpe, 23. Once they entered his car, he shot and killed them both. Kemper had no preference for how he murdered his victims, whether it be strangling, shooting, stabbing, or smothering. His only consistency was the treatment of their corpses, where his MO included necrophilia, rape, and other horrific violations. Kemper would later confess that performing such acts with his victims' corpses allowed him the ultimate control of his victims, and that he relished having the corpses all to himself. He would freely discuss during later interviews what may have started his need to dismember bodies, as well as what was going through his mind after he would do so. A couple of months after the murder of Allison Liu, a records clerk at the police department was inspecting the bill of sale for a particular firearm. She noticed that the purchaser's criminal record, which was officially expunged, could be faintly seen through the blackout marks. She could make out that the person was previously involved in a murder in another county, north of Santa Cruz. The man attempting to buy the firearm was Ed Kemper. By this time, Kemper was well known and well liked by local police, as he would regularly hang out with the off-duty officers after work at a local bar called the Jury Room. Like he'd done with so many psychiatrists, prison staff, and other professionals before them, Kemper came off to the officers as personable, likable, and seemingly as harmless as they come. Big Ed, as they referred to him, would spend hours discussing guns, ammunition, and other topics of interest with the officers. Although Kemper was friendly with police, none of the officers were interested in being the one who would have to confiscate the gun from the towering Big Ed. The most junior of the detectives of the sheriff's department, Michael Alufai, would end up being tasked with confiscating the gun from Kemper, who was not at all considered a suspect in the disappearances at the time. Alufai and his partner drove to Kemper's home on a quiet suburban street just before Kemper was arriving home. They informed him that they needed to retrieve his gun to make sure he was authorized to have it, and without incident, Kemper opened his trunk and allowed the officers to retrieve the gun, bundled in a towel. Alufai noticed that the trunk, oddly, had absolutely nothing in it. No liner, just a bare trunk. But he didn't think much of it. They returned to the station, turned the gun in, and thought nothing further of it, having taken the lives of his grandparents and 6 young women without suspicion. Kemper was about to embark on the he dreamed of since he was 8 years old. It was springtime. It was April. For 2 months, I hadn't killed. I said, it's not going to happen to any more girls. It's got to stay between me and my mother. And it's got to. I can't get away from her. We're still fighting. She's still belittling me. She's still like a puppet on a string, and I entertain her. She knows all my buttons, and I dance like a puppet with that pain. And it had even gotten physical. So here I pick up these 2 young ladies in Berkeley on Ashby Avenue, petite little dolls. I want to see how together I am, if I can resist this temptation. The girls ask Kemper if he's going in their direction, and they get in my car. They want to go one way. I know they need to go the other. If they go the way they're insisting on, we're headed right back out to where the first 2 co-eds were murdered. And I'm saying to myself, oh my God, all I got to do is relax, and they'll take me to their death. I've got the gun in the car, the same one I've been doing it with. I insisted. As gently as I could, I took them where they needed to go, to their college. The girls got out of the car and thanked Kemper. That was 1 week before I murdered my mother. I said, she's got to die, and I've got to die, or girls like that are going to die. And that's when I decided I'm going to murder my mother. On April 20th, 1973, after returning from a party, Kemper's mother, now 52, awakened her son when she arrived home. And she went out to a party. She got soused. She came home, went to sleep. I was woken up by that. Came out. I walked up to her bed. She's laying there reading a paperback, as many thousands of nights before. And she said, oh, I suppose you're going to want to sit up all night and talk now. Shit. I looked at her. I said no. I said good night. And I knew I was going to kill her, you know. And I was so cold and so hard. And that's the first time in 10 years I've looked at it that way. I mean, that intensely, that honestly. It hurts. Then he waited for her to nod off, crept back into her room, and stabbed and beat her to death. And what's her closing words? I suppose you want to sit up all night and talk. God, I wish I had. Then, fearing that his mother's best friend, Sarah Hallett, would soon discover his mother's body, he invited Sarah over for dinner. She was delighted. She arrived, and Kemper strangled her to death as well. Kemper placed both bodies in a closet and fled the area. Taking caffeine pills to keep awake for the more than 1,500-mile drive, he drove nonstop to Pueblo, Colorado. After driving for 3 days without sleeping, Kemper arrived in Pueblo, but couldn't find any news about the killings of his mother or her friend on the radio. But still suspecting police had discovered their bodies and were likely onto him, Kemper found a phone booth and began to make a call. 2 weeks after Detective Alufai visited Kemper to retrieve the towel-wrapped gun from his bare trunk, his Santa Cruz Police Department received a phone call at 5 a.m. in the morning. It was Ed Kemper, freely admitting to killing his mother and her friend. But the officer taking the call didn't take the Big Ed that they used to hang out with at the jury room seriously. He advised Kemper to contact them later. Kemper did, but again was met with disbelief and assumed to be a prank. Kemper called yet again and urged them to send Detective Alufai, who had recently been to his mother's home to confiscate his weapon, to return there to check and confirm his story. Kemper also confessed to killing the 6 co-ed students. Then he waited for the police to come and arrest him. Police rushed to the home of Kemper's mother and found the home undisturbed. There was no indication of the murder until they turned over his mother's mattress and found it soaked in blood. Nearby was a cryptic note left by Kemper, which read, "Not sloppy and incomplete, gents. Just a lack of time. I got things to do." Approximately 5 to 15 a.m. Saturday. No need for her to suffer any more at the hands of this horrible, murderous butcher. It was quick, asleep, the way I wanted it. Ed Kemper was taken into custody. Thrilled by the notoriety of being a serial killer, once Kemper was apprehended, he began compulsively confessing. He provided long and detailed confessions that seemed unending to officers. He delighted in detailing to anyone who would listen the crimes he committed in chilling and graphic detail. Crimes so pathological, the officers were left disturbed. And with Kemper's arrest, police finally discovered why the co-ed killer had eluded them for so long. As he was handing out the police at the jury room, Kemper was observing their strategies relating to his case and gleaning how they planned to identify and catch him. That inside information gave him an upper hand in eluding them. They'd buy me a beer, I'd buy them a beer. Casual relationships, but I was poking around a little bit, trying to find some things out. I knew they wouldn't be privy to hot information, but there were some things that were bothering me. Like, were there any speculations on how they were dying? Did the cops like you? Like I said, a friendly nuisance. I got in the way, and it was deliberate. Again, friendly nuisances are dismissed. Why did Kemper kill? Experts have concluded that all of Kemper's earlier killings were simply a symbolic rehearsal for killing his mother. And once he'd accomplished killing her, he no longer needed to kill. And that's why he turned himself in. Kemper, on the other hand, claims his motives were different. When asked in an interview why he turned himself in, he claimed he sensed the police had found him out when Sergeant Alufai came to confiscate his gun. He figured they were playing a game of cat and mouse with him, and that they were fully aware he was the murderer. And so, to spare his mother the embarrassment of learning that he was the co-ed butcher, he claims he killed her, similar to what he stated in the cryptic note that he left. In a separate interview, however, Kemper claimed that the reason he turned himself in was that the original purpose was gone. It wasn't serving any physical, real, or emotional purpose. It was just a waste of time. Emotionally, I couldn't handle it much longer. I just said to hell with it and called it all off. On May 7, 1973, Kemper was charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder. After learning of his detailed and exhaustive confession, Kemper's defense team had no defense options, other than to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. Kemper's trial began on October 23, 1973. 3 psychiatrists selected by the court deemed Kemper to be legally sane. On November 8, after just 5 hours of deliberation, the jury of 6 men and 6 women found Kemper guilty on all 8 counts of first-degree murder. Prior to sentencing, the judge asked Kemper what he thought his punishment should be. That was an easy question for Kemper, since he'd been dreaming about this moment since childhood. His response to the judge was that he felt that he should be tortured to death. But since there was a moratorium on capital punishment in California, Ed Kemper was sentenced to 8 life sentences to be served concurrently. Edmund Kemper is serving out his prison term at the California Medical Facility State Prison at Vacaville, north of San Francisco. Not surprisingly, given Kemper's apparently likable personality wherever he goes, Kemper has been considered a model prisoner. And ironically, given his crimes, he makes guards, prison staff, and inmates alike feel comfortable in his presence. At one point, he was in charge of scheduling inmates' appointments with psychiatrists. And he was also the coordinator of a project called the Blind Project, a non-profit project to help blind inmates. Kemper voiced over 5,000 hours of narration for the project, resulting in hundreds of audiobooks. Since he's been in prison, Kemper has granted, and no doubt delighted in, numerous in-depth interviews for documentaries and other productions covering his life and crimes. He has also been the subject of multiple books, movies, television miniseries, and even songs. He was the inspiration for the character of Buffalo Bill in the 1988 novel Silence of the Lambs, and a number of others. And several songs have even been released that feature quotes or excerpts from his vast library of interviews. Kemper has also worked extensively with the FBI. In the 1970s, the FBI began a project where they would visit serial killers in prison to help them understand and identify them. Kemper was one of those killers. As a result of interviews during that era, FBI agents were able to identify some common serial killer characteristics and backgrounds that we had not known until that point, including that they typically tortured animals as children. In one interview with Kemper, reporter Robert Ressler recalled a terrifying encounter that occurred during his 3rd interview with Kemper at Vacaville Prison. Ressler had already had 2 previous visits with Kemper, where he was accompanied by at least one other person. But on this 3rd visit, Ressler felt that he had established a rapport with Kemper, so he decided to interview him alone. They spoke in a tiny locked cell near death row for 4 hours. Then, once they concluded their talk, Ressler pressed a very audible buzzer to summon a guard to come let him out. But no one came, so Ressler continued to talk. After a few minutes passed, Ressler pressed the buzzer again. No response. A full 15 minutes later, when there was still no appearance from the guard, Ressler pressed the buzzer again. Still no response. Ressler tried to remain as calm-looking and unconcerned about the lack of response as he possibly could. But Kemper quickly picked up on his reaction and commented, "Relax, they're changing the shift, feeding the guys in the secure area." Kemper then smiled and stood up, revealing his enormous size to Ressler. Then he added, "Might be 15, 20 minutes before they come and get you." Ressler panicked, but tried not to show it. Kemper continued, "If I went in here, you'd be in a lot of trouble, wouldn't you? I could screw your head off and place it on the table to breathe the guard." Realizing that Kemper was completely correct, Ressler tried to fill what seemed like an eternity with talking and bluffing. He told Kemper that he'd be in deep trouble if he messed with him. Kemper responded, "What could they do?" Cut off my TV privileges? Ressler threatened long-term solitary confinement, but Kemper shrugged the threat off and reasoned that whatever period of solitary he would get would pale in comparison to the prestige he gained in prison from killing an FBI agent. Ressler was now in full-on panic mode, but he tried to remain composed. He reflected on how dumb he'd been to decide to interview Kemper alone, suddenly realizing that he'd fallen victim to Stockholm Syndrome, where victims begin to identify with their captors, then trust them as a result. Despite having been the chief instructor for hostage scenarios, Ressler found that he had fallen victim to the very condition that he taught others to look out for. His mind raced to determine his next move. He decided to continue the #1 strategy for hostage scenarios, talk, so he said to Kemper, "Surely you don't think I'd come in here without some method of defending myself, do you?" Kemper replied, "Don't shit me, Ressler. They wouldn't let you up here with any weapons on you." He was right, of course. Ressler verbally sparred back and forth with Kemper to both buy time and allow himself to regain his composure. And then finally a guard arrived. From then on, it became the FBI policy to never allow an agent to interview a convicted killer, rapist, or child molester alone. In 2015, 42 years into his sentence, Kemper suffered a stroke. This brought his volunteer efforts with the Blind Project to an end and resulted in him being declared mentally disabled. In 2019, he was said to be, at least partially confined to a wheelchair, doesn't bathe, and has essentially given up on life. He's generally in very poor health, suffering from diabetes, heart problems, and other ailments. Kemper was first eligible for parole in 1979. His parole would be denied that year, as well as in subsequent hearings every year until 1982. Between 1985 and 2017, Kemper would come up for more parole hearings, 4 of which he waived his right to, and the remaining 5 of which resulted in his parole being denied. At his 1988 hearing, once he was denied, Kemper stated, "Society is not ready in any shape or form for me. I can't fault them for that." And at his 2007 denial, the prosecutor stated, "We don't care how much of a model prisoner he is because of the enormity of his crimes." Kemper's next eligible parole date will be in 2024, at which time he'll be 76 years old. Aside from the heinousness of this case, one finding that sticks with us the most is a statement by Kemper that seems to be common among serial killers and general criminals alike, similar to Joseph Fritzl, who recommended checking the basements of other fathers. And that is that for every one of them that's caught, there are many, many of them that are not. Well, I'm not an expert. I'm not an authority. I'm someone who has been a murderer for almost 20 years. Can you say how many people might be doing crimes like you were doing? It would be a guess, but it's not. It's far more than 35. It isn't that impossible in this society. It happens. Are there more people? They didn't give up. She didn't give up. I did. I came in out of the cold. And what I'm saying is there are some people who prefer it in the cold. In the end, the question that many have is the classic one of nature versus nurture. Was Ed Kemper born to kill, or did his upbringing, environment, and experiences groom him to kill? The ongoing debate amongst scientists, criminologists, and psychologists is which one plays the larger role than making them a serial killer, genetics, or environment. But what experts do agree on is that Kemper is a classic sociopath. Everything's all about him. He feels no guilt. He has no compassion whatsoever. But what of that? Was he born a sociopath? Is it his fault that he's that way? It's a contentious debate. We want to hear what you think. But before you comment, we'll leave you with one statement from Kemper himself, where he shared, "I need to believe that something in me is salvageable."